My little sister? Ghost actual? Ryan Walker's laugh hit the room like a grenade. He snatched the worn patch off her bag, waved it in the air above his head, then slammed it onto the briefing table so hard the classified documents jumped. He grabbed her by the shoulder, spun her toward the room full of elite operators, and announced it like a punchline. Gentlemen, meet the woman who once cried because a dog barked at her. She has a ghost call sign now. The room exploded. Claire did not flinch, did not blink. She simply looked at her brother with eyes that carried something far more devastating than tears. Pure, quiet, absolute disappointment. That silence split the room in half. If you are watching this and you have ever been underestimated by the person you trusted the most, drop the name of your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And please subscribe and follow along until the very end, because what Ghost Actual does next will stay with you long after this video ends. The classified briefing room at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, did not look like much from the outside. It was a room built for function, not comfort. Fluorescent lights overhead, metal folding chairs pushed against a long rectangular table, maps pinned to one wall, 3 monitors running live feeds on another. The kind of room where people walked in carrying weight on their shoulders and rarely left feeling lighter. Master Chief Ryan Walker had been inside rooms like this more times than he could count. 41 years old, decorated beyond what most men ever see in a single career, Ryan Walker was the kind of operator that younger SEALs pointed at when they needed to understand what the job was supposed to look like. 6 feet 2 inches of disciplined muscle and hard-earned instinct. A jaw that looked like it had been chiseled rather than grown. Eyes that measured everything in a room before most people finished walking through the door. He had served with SEAL Team Viper for 9 years. He had buried 2 teammates and carried a third off a mountain in Afghanistan with a bullet still lodged in his own left shoulder. He had earned every single thing attached to his name. And that morning, standing in that briefing room, surrounded by the best operators on the eastern seaboard, Ryan Walker was in his element. The mission brief had just started. Operation Silent Horizon. The target was a high-level enemy commander operating out of a remote mountain facility overseas. The kind of target that required precision, patience, and zero margin for error. The kind of mission that Ryan had spent his entire adult life preparing for. He stood at the head of the table with his arms crossed, scanning the intelligence packet that had been distributed to the team. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Trent sat to his left, already marking entry points on the terrain map with a red pen. Senior Chief Dominic Ramirez was reading the communication protocols on his tablet, occasionally muttering numbers to himself under his breath. Lieutenant Jake Sellers had a series of photographs spread out in front of him and was comparing them to satellite imagery with a magnifying glass the old-fashioned way, because Sellers never fully trusted screens. The team was focused. The team was ready. Then the door opened. Ryan did not look up immediately. New personnel arrived late to briefings sometimes. It happened. He kept his eyes on the intelligence packet. Then he heard Ramirez say very quietly, "Oh," that made Ryan look up. Standing in the doorway was a woman he had not seen in nearly a year. She was 34 years old, 5 feet 6, with dark hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. She wore civilian contractor clothing with military identification badges attached to a lanyard around her neck. She carried a laptop bag over one shoulder and a weathered canvas equipment bag over the other. Her posture was straight but not stiff. She moved into the room with the kind of quiet confidence that people who are used to being underestimated learn to carry without announcing it. Dr. Claire Walker, his younger sister. Ryan straightened up slowly, blinking twice, as if the information his eyes were sending his brain needed a second to fully process. He said. She looked at him with level eyes. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "I'm the intelligence specialist assigned to your operation," she said, setting her equipment bag down on the table near the monitors. "I received the assignment 3 days ago. I assume someone told you." "Nobody told me anything." "Apparently they assumed you would be professional about it either way." Marcus Trent made a sound that was very carefully not a laugh. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. Then looked at the rest of his team, who were all suddenly very interested in their maps and tablets. Claire began setting up her equipment without waiting for the conversation to continue. She pulled open her laptop bag, connected a series of cables to the monitor port on the far wall, and started bringing up data overlays on the screens with a speed that was almost automatic. She had clearly done this many times before. Ryan watched her for a moment. Then he noticed the patch. It was sitting on top of her canvas equipment bag, right at the edge of the table. A worn fabric patch, the kind operators sewed onto bags or jackets. Dark gray background, white stitching. It had seen better days, clearly been washed and reattached more than once, the edges slightly fraying. He picked it up. He read the two words stitched across the center, Ghost Actual. Ryan stood there for a moment, the patch over in his hand. Ghost Actual, he said out loud. Claire heard him but kept working. My little sister, Ryan continued, his voice carrying easily across the room, has a ghost call sign? He looked up at Marcus Trent. Marcus kept his face neutral, but his eyes were doing something complicated. The woman, Ryan went on, and now there was a grin building at the corner of his mouth, a familiar older brother grin that Claire had been seeing her entire life, who hid behind me at every family dinner when a stranger said hello. The woman who made me return a library book for her because she was afraid the librarian would say something about it being overdue. That woman thinks she is some kind of battlefield legend? The laughter that broke out across the table was not mean-spirited. Exactly. These were good men, professional men. But they were also operators, which meant they had a very specific sense of humor and a deeply ingrained instinct to test anything they had not yet personally seen proven. And Ryan Walker, their master chief, their standard bearer, their measuring stick, was laughing. So they laughed. All except Jake Sellers, who just watched Claire without expression. Claire did not laugh. She did not flinch. She set down the cable she was holding, and she turned around slowly, and she looked at her brother with those level, quiet eyes. No anger in them, no tears. Just the particular kind of disappointment that only exists between two people who know each other completely, and one of them is choosing not to see clearly. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her screens. If everyone is finished, she said, I would like to begin the intelligence brief. We have approximately 22 hours before the operational window, and there are several things about this mission package that concern me. The laughter died down. Ryan set the patch back on her bag. Let's hear it, he said. And that was the first time he used those words with her. Not encouragement, not respect. The words you use when you have already decided you are humoring someone. Claire heard it. She had been hearing that tone from people her entire career. She began the brief anyway. The intelligence package for Operation Silent Horizon was, on the surface, exactly what a high-risk special operations mission needed. Clean, comprehensive, detailed down to estimated patrol timing and guard rotation schedules at the mountain facility. The enemy commander, known in the intelligence community only by the operational alias Stone Table, had been tricked to this location with high confidence over the past 3 weeks. Multiple signals intercepts, several human intelligence sources, satellite imagery going back 14 days. Claire walked through every layer of the package with the team, pulling up data overlays, cross-referencing imagery with signals data, building the picture piece by piece in the methodical way that good intelligence analysts do. She was precise, she was thorough. She did not use a single unnecessary word. Ryan watched her without expression, asking clarifying questions every few minutes, testing the data the way he always tested data. He was good at this part. He knew what to look for, knew which threads to pull. But after 40 minutes, he still did not see what was bothering Claire, because Claire had not told them yet what was bothering her. She had been building toward it. Marcus Trent was the first one to notice that she was doing something unusual. He leaned slightly forward in his chair and said, You keep coming back to the communication pattern data. Yes, Claire said, why? She pulled up a side-by-side comparison on the monitor. 2 sets of signals data. Enemy communication logs from the past 3 weeks. Look at the rhythm, she said. Ryan leaned forward despite himself. The data showed a series of communication spikes and quiet periods. Traffic moving through the facility's communication infrastructure. It looked at first pass exactly like what you would expect from a high-level commander operating in a remote location. Operational security, scheduled check-ins, controlled information flow. But Claire had laid the 2 sets side by side for a reason. Week 1, she said, pointing to the left column. Communication traffic has natural variation. Heavy periods, light periods, a few irregular spikes that don't align with any obvious schedule. It looks like a real operation. She moved her finger to the right column. Week 2 and 3, the same general pattern. But look at the spacing. Ryan looked. He looked for a long moment, and then something cold moved through him because he saw it. The spacing was almost identical across both weeks. Not similar, almost identical. That's not natural, Marcus said quietly. No, Claire agreed. Real communication patterns have drift. They respond to events, to personnel changes, to weather, to 100 small variables that nobody can perfectly control. What we are looking at in weeks 2 and 3 is not a living operation. The room was quiet. Ryan sat back. You're saying the intelligence package is fabricated, he said. I'm saying the communication data in the package has been curated, Claire said carefully. Someone took real operational data from week 1 and generated a synthetic version that maintains the same general pattern while removing all the irregularity. It looks correct. It is supposed to look correct, but it is too correct. That's a big call, Dominic Ramirez said from the far end of the table. Not hostile, but serious. You're asking us to question 14 days of corroborated intelligence from multiple collection assets. I'm asking you to look at the spacing on this chart, Claire said, and her voice was absolutely steady. Ryan rubbed his jaw with one hand. He looked at the chart again. Then he looked at Claire. And here was the moment. Here was the moment where a different kind of man, a wiser kind of man, might have paused. Might have recognized that the woman standing in front of him had just identified something that an entire intelligence apparatus had missed. Might have acknowledged that whatever he thought he knew about his sister, what she was showing him right now deserved to be taken seriously. Ryan Walker was not a foolish man, but he was a man who had trusted his own judgment for 20 years and been right almost every time. And he had spent his entire life seeing Claire as the person who needed protecting. This is good work, he said, and he meant it partly. Seriously, Claire. But this pattern variation you're describing could have a dozen other explanations. Equipment standardization, updated protocols on their end. We can't cancel a mission of this priority based on a theory about spacing on a signals chart. Claire looked at him. We don't cancel it, she said. We hold the insertion pending a deeper analysis of the human intelligence sources. We don't have time for a deeper analysis. The operational window opens in 22 hours. Then we use 19 of those hours to verify rather than 17 of them to prepare for an operation that might be walking us into a kill zone. You don't know that it is a kill zone, and you don't know that it isn't, she said. And for the first time, her voice had an edge to it. Not sharp, not angry, but present. The edge of someone who is done being patient with being dismissed. Operators don't survive because they ignore patterns before the bullets start flying, Ryan. They survive because someone looked at the data carefully enough to see what the enemy wanted them to miss. The room was very quiet. Ryan held her gaze. Then he said, we proceed with mission prep. We'll flag your concerns up the chain and let command make the call. He said it in the tone of a man who has already decided what command will say. Claire nodded once. She turned back to her screens. And she kept working, because Claire Walker had spent her entire career in rooms where the people with the loudest voices had already decided not to listen. She had learned years ago that the way you responded to that was not by arguing louder. The way you responded was by being so thoroughly, undeniably right when the moment came that there was no longer any room in the universe for the argument to continue. She pulled up a secondary data set and began cross-referencing the human intelligence sources in the package one by one. This was the part nobody saw her doing. This was the work that happened in the quiet hours, in the spaces between the conversations and the briefings, and the moments when operators were checking their gear and running through tactical scenarios. While the team prepared to go to war, Claire Walker sat in front of her screens and followed the data wherever it led. She started with the human intelligence sources. 3 separate individuals, identified in the package only by code designation, had placed Stone Table at the mountain facility with high confidence over the past 2 weeks. All 3 had independent reporting. All 3 had been assessed as reliable. She started pulling their reporting histories. The first source, code designation Falcon, had a reporting history going back 11 months. Reliable, consistent. Occasional gaps in reporting that tracked with operational periods. Nothing unusual. The second source, code designation Hammer, had a 6-month history. Also consistent. But Claire noticed something when she pulled the raw reporting data rather than the summarized version that had made it into the intelligence package. Hammer's reporting had been filtered, not obviously, not crudely, but filtered. 3 data points in Hammer's raw reporting that had not made it into the package. She flagged them and kept going. The third source, code designation River, had a reporting history of only 8 weeks, short for source being used to anchor a high confidence assessment on a target of this priority. Short enough to be suspicious. She pulled River's raw reporting. Read it once, then read it again, then sat completely still for almost 90 seconds. Because River's reporting, in the raw unfiltered version, contained a specific phrase in the source notes, a phrase that did not appear anywhere in the intelligence package. A phrase that, in the context of intelligence collection, meant only one thing. She had seen it before, twice in her career. Both times it had preceded catastrophic mission failure. The phrase was secondary asset confirmed. In the language of collection methodology, secondary asset confirmed meant that the information had been verified by a separate source, which sounded reassuring until you understood what it actually meant in practice. It meant the source's reporting had been corroborated by a second source. The second source. In this context, at this priority level with this operational timeline, Claire went very still because she knew, with the particular certainty of someone who had spent years learning to read the language that intelligence data speaks in, that secondary asset confirmed did not always mean what it appeared to mean. Sometimes it meant exactly what it said, and sometimes it meant that someone in the collection chain had needed to make a piece of unreliable reporting look reliable, and the fastest way to do that was to flag it as corroborated by a source that, if you looked hard enough and went far enough back in the system, turned out to be the same source under a different designation. A loop. Source A confirming source B, who was actually source A. She opened a second window and started tracing designations. It took her 47 minutes. When she was done, she sat back in her chair and pressed both hands flat against the table in front of her, taking a slow breath. River was not a separate source. River was a downstream alias for Falcon. The same human intelligence source, operating under two different designations, had provided what appeared to be corroborating reports on Stonetable's location. The intelligence package had presented this as two independent sources confirming the same information. It was one source that had, at some point in the collection chain, been separated into two apparent streams, either through an error or through deliberate manipulation. And with that single source removed from the confidence assessment, the entire picture of Stonetable at the Mountain facility went from high confidence to barely supported. Claire stood up. She walked across the room to where Ryan was standing with Marcus Trent, going through a tactical approach overlay for the fourth time. Ryan, she said. He looked up. I need 5 minutes. Something in her voice made him look at her differently than he had been looking at her all day. Not the dismissive older brother look. Something more careful. Give us the room, he said to Marcus. Marcus nodded and walked out. Ryan turned to Claire. She told him what she had found. She walked him through it step by step, laying out the source designations, the raw reporting data, the secondary asset confirmation flag, the designation trace. She did not editorialize. She did not say, I told you so. She presented the data the way she always presented data, as clearly and completely as she could. When she finished, Ryan was quiet for a long moment. If you're right, he said slowly. The intelligence package was manipulated, Claire said. Someone wanted us at that mountain facility. Stonetable may or may not be there, but the confidence assessment that supports this entire operation is built on a single source loop, and that means we do not know what we are actually walking into. Ryan looked at the wall for a moment. Then he looked back at her, and the older brother look was gone entirely. What replaced it was the look of an operator who has just been handed information that changes everything. How long have you known about this? He said. I suspected the communication pattern 6 hours ago, she said. I confirmed the source issue 47 minutes ago. You've been working through this alone this whole time. That's my job. Ryan was quiet again. Then, I need to bring this to Commander Hayes. Yes, Claire said. He's going to push back. Yes, Claire said. He is. Ryan looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Something moving across his face. Something he did not quite put into words. Then he said, walk me through a bit again, from the beginning. I want to be able to answer every question he throws at us. Us, not I. Us. It was small. It was the smallest possible thing, but she noticed it. She pulled out her laptop. From the beginning, she said. Sit down. Commander William Hayes, when Ryan and Claire walked the intelligence through for him 20 minutes later, did exactly what Ryan had predicted. He pushed back hard. He was a big man with a military career that predated Ryan's by 15 years, and he had seen intelligence assessments challenged before, and he was not accustomed to those challenges coming from people who had not spent significant time in the field, and he made that point clearly and without much diplomatic padding. Dr. Walker, he said, using her title in a way that did not sound like respect, this mission has been in planning for 6 weeks. The intelligence package has been reviewed by 4 separate analytical teams, and none of them had access to the raw source reporting, Claire said. They were working from the summarized assessment package. The designation loop is only visible in the raw data. You're telling me that our entire collection chain missed a designation error. I'm telling you that the designation error may not have been accidental. The room went very still. Commander Hayes looked at Ryan. Ryan said, "She's right, sir. I've looked at everything she laid out. The analysis is solid." Hayes looked back at Claire. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that someone with access to the source management system created a false corruption loop specifically to elevate the confidence assessment on this mission, which means someone inside the collection chain knows we are going." Hayes sat back. For a long, terrible moment, nobody spoke. Then Hayes said, "You understand what you're implying?" "Yes, sir," Claire said, "I do." Hayes looked at Ryan again, and this time Ryan did not look away. "Sir," Ryan said, "I've run 31 operations, some of them with worse intelligence than this. But I've never run one where the intelligence itself was the threat. I need you to hear what she's telling you." Hayes put both fists on the table. He looked at the ceiling. He was a man who had built an entire career on the precision of his own judgment, and he was being asked, in the 21st hour before an operation, to accept that everything he had been working from might be architecture built by the enemy. It was a hard thing to accept. It was one of the hardest things a person in his position could be asked to accept. He looked at Claire. "You have 19 hours before the window," he said. "I know. Can you prove it in 19 hours? Claire met his eyes without flinching. "Give me access to the full source database in an isolated network terminal," she said, "and I will give you an answer in 6. Hayes stared at her for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at Ryan. Ryan nodded once. Hayes turned back to Claire. "You have 6 hours, he said. Claire Walker picked up her laptop. She walked out of the room. Ryan watched her go. And for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never expected to feel while watching his younger sister walk through a door. He felt something very close to awe. She sat down at the isolated terminal in a secure side room at 11:43 p.m. She stood up from it at 3:18 a.m. In those 3 hours and 35 minutes, Claire Walker did not take a break. She did not eat. She drank approximately half a cup of cold coffee that someone had left on the desk before she got there. She followed every thread. She traced every designation chain. She pulled raw reporting logs going back 18 months. She mapped every data node that touched the intelligence package for Operation Silent Horizon. And at 3:10 a.m., she walked back into Commander Hayes' office with her laptop in her arms and her face completely composed and laid the finished analysis on his desk. It was not just a source loop. It was deliberate manipulation. 3 separate nodes in the collection chain had been touched by the same set of access credentials over a period of 11 days. The credentials belonged to an analyst who had died in a vehicle accident 14 months earlier. Someone had been using a dead man's credentials to walk through the intelligence architecture and rearrange the furniture. The mountain facility was not the mission, it was the misdirection. But what the real mission was, Claire had not yet been able to determine. And that was what kept her awake, not the revelation itself, but the piece she could not yet see. Because there was always a reason. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to send SEAL Team Viper to a specific mountain at a specific time. The question was not whether it was a trap. The question was what the trap was protecting. Commander Hayes read the analysis in complete silence. When he finished, he set it down. He looked at Claire. Then he looked at Ryan, who was standing against the wall behind her. Then he looked back at Claire. And he said something that Ryan would remember for the rest of his life. "Get some sleep," Hayes said, "both of you, 2 hours. Then I want you back in this room. Because we need to figure out what they don't want us looking at while we're busy chasing Stone Table up a mountain." Claire nodded. She picked up her laptop. She walked toward the door. And Commander Hayes said quietly, almost to himself, as she walked past him, something that he probably did not intend for anyone but himself to hear. "Ghost Actual," he said, not mocking it, saying it the way you say a call sign when you finally understand why someone earned it. Claire did not turn around, but the corner of her mouth moved, just slightly. She walked out into the hallway. Ryan came out behind her. They stood in the corridor for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming above them, the bass quiet around them at 3 in the morning. "You need anything?" Ryan said. Claire considered the question. "No," she said. "Claire." She looked at him. He was rubbing the back of his neck with one hand looking at the floor. Ryan Walker. The man who had never struggled for words in his life. The man who had given speeches to wounded operators and given orders under fire and given interviews to military media with the kind of easy confidence that most people could only admire from a distance. He was struggling for words. I was wrong, he started. About earlier. I should not have. It's all right, Claire said. It is not all right. She looked at him for a moment. Get some sleep, Ryan, she said. We have more work to do. She walked down the corridor. He watched her go. The woman who had spent her entire childhood standing behind him while he walked into every room first. The woman who had apologized to him once for crying on his deployment day, as if her feelings were an inconvenience. The woman who had been building Ghost Actual in the dark for years, in classified rooms that he was not cleared to enter, doing work that most people would never know existed, moving through the shadows of a world that ran on the intelligence that people like Claire spent their lives manufacturing from noise and silence and data and instinct. He had laughed at her call sign. He thought about that, standing alone in the corridor. He thought about the patch, the worn edges, the stitching that had been resewn at least twice. Someone had given her that call sign, or she had earned it so thoroughly that someone could not help giving it to her. And he had picked it up and laughed. Ryan Walker walked slowly back toward the bunk room. He did not sleep much during those 2 hours. He lay on his back in the dark and thought about the data Claire had laid in front of Commander Hayes. He thought about the dead man's credentials. He thought about the mountain that was a misdirection. He thought about what they were not supposed to be looking at. And somewhere in the second hour, lying awake in the dark, the thought that landed in him and would not leave was this: whatever was coming next, he was glad she was there. Not because she was useful, not because her analysis was correct, but because Claire Walker, his quiet little sister, was exactly where she was supposed to be. And she had been there long before anyone in that room was willing to see it. The alarm went off at 5:15 in the morning. Ryan was already awake. He sat up, put his feet on the floor, and looked at his hands for a moment. Then he got up. He had work to do. They all did, because the trap had not been sprung yet. And Ghost Actual had already found the wire. Commander Hayes had given Claire 6 hours, and she had delivered in 3.5. That should have settled everything. It did not. At 5:45 in the morning, when Ryan walked back into the main briefing room with 2 cups of coffee and found Claire already at her screens again, he realized that finding the problem was only the first door. What was behind that door was a hallway full of more doors, and none of them were going to open easily. He set one of the cups beside her without saying anything. She picked it up without looking away from the screen. They stayed like that for almost a minute, which was, in the Walker family language, the equivalent of a long and meaningful conversation. You find anything new, he finally said. 3 things, she said. None of them good. Of course not. She pulled up a map overlay on the left monitor. Ryan leaned forward, setting his own cup down on the table. The map showed a regional infrastructure grid, power, water communication relays, the kind of map that civil engineers use, not special operations teams. After Hayes released me from the terminal access this morning, Claire said, I kept running a parallel track on the question he asked last night. What are they protecting while we chase Stone Table up a mountain? Ryan looked at the map, and 3 civilian infrastructure sites within operational range of the mountain facility. All 3 are within a 200-kilometer radius. All 3 have had unusual network activity in the past 10 days. Ryan straightened up slowly. Define unusual. Probe attempts. Low signature. The kind of scanning pattern you run when you are learning a system before you access it. Someone's been testing their networks. Someone has been learning exactly how they work, Claire said. And 10 days is enough time to learn enough to do serious damage. Ryan looked at the 3 sites she had marked on the map. A power distribution hub, a communications relay station, and a water treatment facility serving a regional population that the data notation in the corner of the screen placed at just over 400,000 people. He felt the floor shift slightly under him, not literally, but the way it does when information changes the entire shape of what you thought you were standing on. Which one, he said. I don't know yet, Claire said. That's the first thing I don't know. What's the second? I don't know when. And the third? She turned and looked at him direct. I don't know if we have enough time to find out before someone on the other side realizes that we are no longer moving toward the mountain. Ryan was quiet. Then he picked up his coffee, took a long sip, and said, I'll get Hayes. He was halfway to the door when she said, Ryan. He stopped. The next conversation is going to be harder than last night's, she said. Hayes listened last night because you backed me up. If you walk in there with any part of you still thinking about what happened yesterday with the patch, with how the team reacted, any of that, he will feel it. And he will use it as a reason not to hear the harder version of this. Ryan turned around slowly. He looked at his sister, really looked at her, the dark circles under her eyes, the tension running through her shoulders that she was controlling so completely that you had to know her well to see it. I'm not thinking about the patch, he said. Good, she said, and turned back to her screens. He got Hayes. Hayes arrived in the briefing room at 6:12 in the morning, looking like a man who had slept 4 hours in his uniform and was using sheer professional anger to compensate for everything the 4 hours had not provided. He was followed by Lieutenant Commander Patricia Osei, the base intelligence officer, a compact, sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s who had the particular walk of someone who expected to be the smartest person in any room she entered. She looked at Claire with an expression that was professionally neutral and personally skeptical. Dr. Walker, Hayes said, taking a seat. What do we have? Claire did not waste a syllable. She walked Hayes and Osei through the infrastructure analysis in 12 minutes flat. The 3 sites, the network probe patterns, the 10-day timeline, the correlation between the probe activity and the period during which the manipulated intelligence package had been steering SEAL Team Viper toward the mountain. When she finished, Osei spoke first. The probe activity you're describing, Osei said, could have half a dozen explanations that have nothing to do with a coordinated operation. Routine penetration testing by the facilities themselves. Opportunistic scanning by unrelated actors. A signals collection operation targeting something else entirely. Yes, Claire said. Osei blinked. She had expected resistance, not agreement. All of those explanations are possible, Claire continued. I am not telling you that this probe activity is definitely connected to what we found in the intelligence package. I am telling you that we have a manipulated intelligence package that was designed to put a SEAL team in the wrong place at a specific time. And within operational range of that wrong place, there are 3 civilian infrastructure sites that have been receiving unusual network attention during the same period. The probability that those 2 facts are unrelated is something I cannot calculate, but I would not bet 400,000 people's water supply on it. The room went quiet. Osei looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at the map. If you had to choose one, Hayes said, gun to your head. Which site? Claire did not hesitate. The water treatment facility. Why? Because the power hub and the communication relay have hardened backup systems. Physical redundancy. You knock them out, and the damage is serious but recoverable within hours. The water treatment facility serves a population that has no immediate alternative water source. Contamination or shutdown is not recoverable within hours. It is recoverable within days. And in that window, you have a public health emergency that generates exactly the kind of chaos that is useful to people who want attention away from whatever they are actually doing. Hayes drummed his fingers on the table once. Then he looked at Ryan. What do you need from me, Ryan said. Hayes turned back to Claire. What do you need from me? It was the first time he had asked her that. Claire registered it. She did not show that she registered it. But somewhere behind those level, precise eyes, something noted it and filed it away. I need direct access to the network forensics data from all 3 facilities, she said. Not the summary reports, the raw logs. And I need a secure channel to the regional authority that manages the water facility's infrastructure so I can ask them 3 specific questions about their system configuration. That second request goes outside the wire, Osei said immediately. We start making contact with civilian infrastructure authorities about a potential attack, and we risk tipping our hand to whoever is watching their communications. Then we make the contact through a channel they are not watching, Claire said. And you know of one? Claire looked at Osei steadily. I have used 3 in the past 2 years for similar purposes. None of them were compromised. Osei held her gaze for a moment. Then she looked at Hayes. Hayes said, do it. Osei's jaw tightened slightly. She nodded. Ryan caught something in that exchange. A current running between Hayes and Osei that he could not fully read. Hayes was moving fast, making decisions that bypassed the normal chain of review, and Osei did not like it, and Hayes knew she did not like it, and he was making those decisions anyway, which meant Hayes believed Claire. Fully in less than 12 hours, Commander William Hayes had gone from running an operation based on a 14-day intelligence package reviewed by 4 analytical teams to sitting in a 6 a.m. briefing room listening to a woman in contractor clothing describe a scenario that invalidated everything he had been working from. And he believed her. Ryan took a breath. The raw network forensics data arrived on Claire's secure terminal at 7:23 a.m. 3 separate file packages, each one dense, with the kind of low-level system logging that most analysts would have needed half a day to interpret. Claire started with the water treatment facility's logs, working through the data with her coffee growing cold beside her, and her eyes moving across the screen with a speed and focus that made Marcus Trent, who had wandered in around 7:30 and taking up a position leaning against the wall, quietly stop everything he was doing and just watch her. He had never seen anyone work like that, not in a tactical sense. He had seen operators move with incredible efficiency under pressure. He had seen pilots and navigators and engineers work with the kind of focused intensity that their training produced. But this was different. This was someone following a thread through a dark room without a flashlight, moving not by sight but by something that looked almost like instinct, but was actually the product of so much accumulated pattern recognition that it had become indistinguishable from instinct. Trent watched her for almost 20 minutes without saying anything. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" She did not look up. "Go ahead. How long have you been doing this?" "Doing what?" "This, what you're doing right now." Claire was quiet for a moment, her eyes still moving across the screen. 11 years, she said. Trent absorbed that and the call sign. Ghost Actual. Who gave you that? A pause. Slightly longer than the last one. A team in Djibouti, she said. 3 years ago. I identified a network intrusion in their communication infrastructure 40 minutes before it would have compromised their extraction route. Trent was quiet. 40 minutes, he said. 38, technically. Another pause. And Ryan doesn't know that, Trent said. It was not a question. Ryan and I don't talk about work, Claire said. Trent pushed off the wall, walked over to the table, and sat down 2 seats away from her. He folded his hands in front of him. He was not a man given to overt displays of emotion, but there was something in his posture that had shifted. For what it's worth, he said, the thing he did with the patch. He knew he was wrong before you walked out of the room. I've worked with him 9 years. I know what his face looks like when he knows he's wrong and won't say it yet. Claire finally glanced at him. Just for a second. He said it last night, she said. He said it to Hayes, Trent said. Backed you up in front of the boss. That's Ryan's version of an apology. Claire looked back at her screen. I know, she said quietly. Trent nodded. He got up and went to get more coffee. At 9:17 a.m., Claire found the first concrete thread. She stopped typing. She leaned forward, her face 6 inches from the screen, reading something 3 times in rapid succession. Then she sat back. Marcus, she said. Trent appeared in the doorway 15 seconds later with a coffee mug in his hand. And get Hayes. Trent looked at her face. Put the mug down. Left without asking a question. Ryan arrived first, Hayes and Osi 2 minutes behind him. Claire had the discovery up on the main monitor by the time they were all in the room. The water treatment facility uses a tiered control system. She said, standing, moving fast now. The primary treatment controls are on an isolated network, physically separated, air-gapped, theoretically inaccessible from outside. Theoretically, Hayes said. Theoretically, Claire confirmed. The secondary administrative system handles billing, scheduling, maintenance records. That system is connected, and it sits inside the same physical infrastructure as the primary control system, connected by one internal relay that was installed during a maintenance upgrade 8 months ago. A bridge, Ryan said. A bridge that the facility's own security audit, which I can see in their maintenance records, flagged as a potential vulnerability. Claire's voice was steady, but her hands were moving, pulling up documentation on the secondary monitor. The audit was filed. The upgrade was recommended. The work order was approved. She stopped. It was never performed, she said. The room absorbed that. Someone knew it was never performed, Osi said slowly. Someone knew, Claire confirmed, because someone has been sitting inside the administrative system for 6 days reading every document in it, including the unfulfilled security work order, including the internal relay specifications, including she pulled up one final document on the secondary monitor, the automated maintenance cycle that takes the primary control system's external monitoring offline for 12 minutes every 72 hours for routine self-diagnostic. Hayes moved forward until he was standing directly in front of the secondary monitor. He read the document. He turned around. He looked at Claire. When is the next cycle, he said. Claire looked at him with complete calm. 14 hours and 22 minutes from now, she said. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. The number sat in the center of the room like a live grenade that everyone could see, and nobody wanted to be the first to breathe near. 14 hours and 22 minutes. That was the operational window. Not the mountain. Never the mountain. The mountain was the misdirection. The bright object dangled in front of a team of elite operators to pull their eyes in exactly the wrong direction, while something quieter and more catastrophic positioned itself in the place nobody was watching. Ryan felt the cold settle into his chest. Not fear exactly. Operators of his experience did not experience fear the way civilians imagined it. It was more like clarity, the sudden, total removal of everything irrelevant, leaving only the shape of the actual problem in sharp relief. The shape of the actual problem was this. Someone had planned to use that 12-minute window in the water facility's monitoring cycle to access the primary control system through the unfulfilled bridge vulnerability. And they had constructed an elaborate intelligence fiction to ensure that the one team in the region capable of stopping them was standing on a mountain in the wrong country when it happened. "We need to close the bridge," Ryan said. "We need to do more than close the bridge," Claire said. "Closing the bridge alerts them that we know. If they know we know, they pivot. They have a contingency. People who build operations this sophisticated always have a contingency." "So what do you recommend?" Hayes said. "We close the bridge on our timeline, not theirs," Claire said. "We reach the facility's control system through the same administrative pathway they plan to use. We close the internal relay remotely, and we do it in a window that looks like routine scheduled maintenance so that whoever is watching the facility's network sees nothing unusual." "You can do that," Osi said, not skeptical anymore. Actually asking. "I can do that," Claire said. "How long do you need?" "To do it safely, 6 hours of preparation. 30 minutes to execute." Hayes looked at his watch. "That gives us 7 hours of buffer before their window," he said. 6.5, Claire said. "I want the buffer." Hayes almost smiled, almost. "Dr. Walker," he said, "get started." Claire sat back down. She pulled up a new terminal window. She started working. Ryan stayed in the room, pulling up a chair to a position where he could see both her screens without being close enough to interrupt. He had run protective details on sensitive operations before. He understood the principle of being present and invisible at the same time. But that was not entirely why he stayed. He stayed because he was watching his sister work, and he could not entirely explain what that was doing to him. He had grown up with Claire. He knew the version of her that sat at the dinner table during holidays and answered questions about her job in the vague, carefully non-committal way that people with classified clearances learn to speak in public. He knew the version that called on his birthday every year, without fail, and left voicemails that were warm and a little awkward because the Walker family had never been entirely comfortable with direct emotional expression. He knew the version that had cried exactly once in front of him as an adult, the day they buried their father, and had pulled herself together faster than he had. He thought he knew her. He had not known her at all. The woman at that terminal was someone he was meeting for the first time. At 11:40 a.m., Marcus Trent appeared in the doorway again, with a look on his face that Ryan recognized immediately. "What?" Ryan said. "Comms just picked something up," Trent said. "You need to hear this." Stood. Looked at Claire. She had heard but did not turn around. "Go," she said. He went. Trent walked him to the communications room, where a signals technician named Corporal Lynn was sitting in front of a receiver with headphones around his neck and an expression that mixed professional neutrality with something that looked very much like alarm. "Play it," Trent said. Lynn hit a key. What came through the speaker was a fragment, 23 seconds of encoded transmission that Lynn had pulled from a frequency that should have been clean. The encoding was not standard. It was not any encoding that Lynn had in his library, but the pattern underneath it, the rhythm of the transmission itself, was recognizable to someone who had been listening to enough of them. It was a countdown confirmation. Someone was confirming a timeline. Someone was confirming it from inside the base perimeter. Ryan stood very still. "Inside the perimeter," he said. "The signal origin triangulates to within 500 meters of this building," Lynn said. "I've been running the triangulation 3 times to make sure." "How long ago?" 7 minutes. Ryan looked at Trent. Trent looked at Ryan. Neither of them said the word that was sitting between them. Mole. Not a targeting issue. Not a collection chain vulnerability exploited from outside. Someone on the inside. Someone who knew about the morning's briefing. Someone who had just transmitted a timeline confirmation that could only mean one thing. They now knew that SEAL Team Viper was no longer moving toward the mountain, and they were adjusting their timeline. Ryan turned and walked back to Claire at a pace that was just below a run. He came through the door and said, "They know we've moved." Claire's hand stopped on the keyboard. a full 2 seconds. Then how? Transmission from inside the perimeter. 7 minutes ago, she turned around in her chair. Her face was still composed, but her eyes were doing something Ryan had not seen in them before. A rapid calculation running through implications the way a targeting computer runs through trajectories. They're moving up the window, she said. How do you know that? Because if I were them and I found out the opposing team knew what I was planning, I would not wait for my scheduled window. I would accelerate. Ryan leaned on the table with both hands. How far can they accelerate it? That depends on how much of the infrastructure work they've pre-staged, Claire said. If they've already positioned the access tools inside the administrative system, they might be able to execute in as little as 2 hours. 2 hours, or less. Straightened up, he looked at his sister. 2 hours. Everything he had trained for, every operation he had run, every decision he had made under pressure had involved an enemy he could locate, a target he could approach, a threat with a physical position in space that he could move against. This enemy was in a wire, in a system, in a relay inside a building 200 kilometers away that none of his training and none of his weapons could touch. There was only one person in that room who could touch it. Claire, he said. I know, she said. Can you do it in 2 hours? She turned back to her screens. I planned for 6, she said. I know. The preparation work I haven't done yet is not ceremonial, she said. It exists because moving through a live system without proper preparation creates risks, errors, unintended signals. I know, Ryan said again. I know all of that. Can you do it? A pause, the kind of pause that contains an entire calculation. I can do it in 90 minutes, she said. But I need the room quiet, and I need Hayes to authorize me a direct line to the facility's administrative network right now, not through the standard request process. Done, Ryan said. He was already moving toward the door. Ryan, she said. He stopped. She had not turned around. If something goes wrong inside the system, she said, if I trip a wire I don't see and they detect my access, they will execute immediately. Whatever they have staged in there, they will run it. And there will be nothing I can do to stop it once it starts. Ryan stood in the doorway. Then don't trip a wire, he said. A beat, that's not helpful, she said. I know, he said. But you're not going to trip the wire. She was quiet. How do you know that, she said. Ryan looked at the back of his sister's head, the tight bun, the set of her shoulders, the posture of someone carrying a weight that she had been carrying alone for a very long time. Because, he said, you've been moving through dark rooms without making a sound your entire career. That's what ghosts do. Claire did not respond immediately. Then she said, get me Hayes. He got Hayes. Hayes authorized the direct line in 4 minutes, which was approximately 14 minutes faster than any authorization process Ryan had ever witnessed in his military career, which told him everything he needed to know about what Hayes thought of the situation. Claire started the clock at 11:58 a.m. She worked in absolute silence. Osi stood in the corner of the room and watched, not interfering, not contributing, just watching, with an expression that had completed its journey from skepticism through reluctant attention and was now somewhere in the territory of focused witness. Ryan stood against the opposite wall. Trent was in the doorway. None of them spoke. The sound in the room was Claire's keyboard and the faint hum of the monitors and the occasional short notations she would speak into a small recording device beside her, documenting her steps in real time in case something went wrong and someone else needed to continue from where she stopped. At 12:31 p.m., she said, very quietly, I'm in the administrative system. Nobody moved. The relay is where I expected it, she said. The bridge is live. They have tools pre-staged on the administrative side. Whatever they plan to do, they were ready to do it. Can you see who placed the tools? Osi said from the corner. I can see the access signature, Claire said. Same dead credentials from the intelligence package. They've been using the same key for everything. Can you trace the physical location of the user? Not from here, Claire said. That's a different problem for a different room. Right now I am looking at the bridge. She stopped talking. Her hands moved. 12:41 p.m., 12:44 p.m. At 12:47 p.m., Claire said, I'm closing the relay. The room held its breath. Her hands moved once more. Then she stopped. She sat back. She pressed both hands flat on the table in front of her. The same gesture she had made the night before after tracing the designation loop, and she took one slow breath. The bridge is closed, she said. The relay is locked at the hardware configuration level. They cannot reopen it without physical access to the facility. The room released. Hayes stepped forward from where he had been standing for the past 47 minutes without moving and said, Are you certain? Yes, Claire said. There is no chance they accessed the primary system before you closed it. The primary system's diagnostic logs show no unauthorized access, she said. We got there first. Hayes looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at his sister's back. She had not turned around yet. She was still sitting with her hands flat on the table, looking at the screens, and Ryan understood that she was doing what operators did after a thing that could have gone very differently, sitting with it for a moment before letting it become past tense. He understood that because he had done it himself many times, on hilltops and in corridors and in the back seats of vehicles driving away from places that had asked a great deal of him. He had never expected to recognize that moment in his sister. He was recognizing it now. Hayes was on the phone before he finished his exhale, calling up the chain with a speed and directness that made clear how far outside normal protocol this entire morning had operated. The calls would continue for hours. The larger machinery of counterintelligence would begin moving toward the transmission source inside the perimeter. The facility would be secured. The staged access tools inside the administrative system would be forensically preserved and traced. All of that was beginning now. But in that room, in that moment, the thing Ryan was most aware of was the sound of his sister breathing steadily a terminal she had just used to protect 400,000 people who would never know her name. O.C. walked to the center of the room. She looked at Claire's back. Then she said something that Ryan would remember almost word for word, because it was said by a woman who chose every word with precision and never offered anything she had not fully meant. Dr. Walker, O.C. said, I owe you a professional apology. I brought skepticism into this room that was not earned, and I allowed it to slow a process that required speed. That will not happen again. Claire turned around in her chair. She looked at O.C. You were doing your job, Claire said. Skepticism in this context is not a flaw. It's its requirement. O.C. held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once, precisely, and walked out of the room to make her own calls. Trent let out a long breath from the doorway. I need about 4 sandwiches, he said to no one in particular, and disappeared toward the mess, which left Ryan and Claire alone in the room. Ryan walked forward until he was standing beside her chair. He looked at the screens, the closed relay, the locked configuration, the clean diagnostic log. You did it in 49 minutes, he said. I prepared more than I thought I had, she said. You prepared more than you thought you had, he repeated. And then quietly, you've been preparing for a long time. Claire was quiet. 11 years, she said. He looked at her profile. Djibouti, he said. She glanced up at him. Marcus told me the story, he said. She looked back at the screen. 38 minutes, she said. Yeah, Ryan said. The word came out rough. Not broken exactly, but worn at the edges in the way that things get when they have been held too tightly for too long. He pulled out a chair beside her and sat down. They sat side by side at the terminal for a while, not saying anything, which was the most honest thing either of them had done with each other in years. Outside the room, the base was waking up to a morning that had been entirely different from what it expected. Phones were ringing. Secure channels were buzzing. The machinery of something large and urgent was turning over in the way it turns over when a threat has been stopped before it became a catastrophe, which means almost nobody will ever fully know how close it was. In the room, Ryan finally said, we still have a mole. Yes, Claire said, that's not your problem to solve alone. No, she agreed. That one we solved together. Ryan nodded. Then he said, quietly enough that it could have been to himself, when we were kids. When you used to follow me to the end of the driveway every morning before school. I always thought you were following me because you needed me there. Claire looked at the screen. I know, she said. I was wrong about that too. Yes, she said, you were. He did not say anything else. Neither did she. But something in the space between them had changed shape. Something that had been arranged in a particular way for 34 years, oldest to youngest, protector to protected, loud to quiet, had rearranged itself into something more accurate, more honest, more like what it had always actually been. Ryan leaned back in his chair, stretched his neck, and said, you should eat something. You sound like Mom, Claire said. Somebody in this family has to. The corner of her mouth moved. It was the closest thing to a smile that the last 20 hours had produced. And Ryan Walker, Master Chief, SEAL Team Viper, 31 operations, 2 buried teammates, a bullet he still carried the scar from, looked at that small movement at the corner of his sister's mouth and felt something unlock in his chest that he did not have a military term for. He thought the civilian word for it was probably relief, the kind that comes not from surviving a thing yourself, but from watching someone you love finally be seen. Hayes appeared in the doorway. "We have a problem," he said. Ryan and Claire both turned. Hayes's face had the particular flatness it got when the problem was not theoretical. "The transmission source," Hayes said. "We triangulated to a building on the south perimeter," and Ryan said. "The building is the communications relay station," Hayes said. "Which means whoever sent that transmission did it with authorized access to our primary communication infrastructure." The room went cold again. Claire stood up. "If they have access to the communication infrastructure," she said. "Yes," Hayes said. "Then they can hear everything we've been saying," she said. Hayes looked at her steadily. "We operated on a secured terminal network this morning. We operated on a terminal network that we secured this morning based on our own assessment of its integrity," Claire said. "If someone with authorized access to the communication relay has been watching the network for longer than this morning." She stopped. Hayes finished it. "Then they may know more than just that we moved. They may know what we found," Claire said. "And they may know that the relay is closed." The silence that followed was the particular silence of a room full of people recalculating. Ryan looked at Claire. Claire looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at the doorway. Then he said, "Dr. Walker, I need you to do something I have never asked an intelligence analyst to do in 30 years of military service." Claire met his eyes. "Tell me," she said. Hayes said it slowly, each word carrying its full weight. "I need you to become the threat." Claire did not blink. "Explain." "If they're listening to our network," Hayes said, stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind him, "then anything we transmit through standard channels is compromised. Every order I give through the communication relay, every position update, every tactical instruction to any team on this base, they hear it before my own people act on it." Ryan was already on his feet. "We go dark, full communication blackout." "We can't," Hayes said. "Going dark is itself a signal. If we suddenly stop all traffic, they know we've identified the relay compromise. They accelerate again, and this time, we don't know what they're accelerating toward because we still don't know everything they have staged." Claire was standing with both hands resting on the back of her chair, and her mind was moving so fast that her face had gone completely still, which Ryan now recognized as what happened when his sister was operating at full capacity. The stillness was not absence. It was concentration so complete that it had consumed every surface expression. "You want to feed them false information through the compromised channel," she said. "I want them to believe," Hayes said, "that we are still confused, that we found the relay vulnerability but not the mole, that we closed the water facility bridge as a precaution, but we don't understand the full picture. I want them calm and positioned and confident that their operation is still viable on a modified timeline, while we use a completely separate communication architecture to run the real response," Claire said, "which I do not currently have," Hayes said. "Because the only communication infrastructure on this base that I fully trust right now is the one standing in this room." Ryan looked at Hayes. "You want us to run a parallel operation off the books?" "I want Dr. Walker to architect a communication system using assets outside our existing infrastructure," Hayes said. "Personal devices, civilian networks, anything that the relay access cannot touch. And I want her to do it in the next 40 minutes while I feed traffic through the compromised channel that makes our friend in the South Perimeter building believe we are still behind." The room absorbed that for a moment. Then Claire said, "I need Trent." Ryan was already moving toward the door. "And a personal laptop that has never been connected to this base's network," she added. "Mine's in the bunk room." Trent's voice came from the hallway. He had been standing just outside the door. How long he had been there was unclear, but his expression suggested the answer was long enough. "Get it," Claire said. He was gone before she finished the sentence. Hayes looked at Ryan. "Your team needs to be briefed. Verbally. In a room with no active devices." "The vehicle bay," Ryan said immediately. "No installed electronics. We've used it for sensitive conversations before." 20 minutes, Hayes said. "I'll handle the traffic on the compromised channel. I'll make it look like we're running a diagnostic review and considering standing down the operation entirely. Confused and cautious. That buys us the most time." "And the mole," Ryan said. Hayes's expression did not change exactly, but something in it settled into a harder shape. "When we know who it is, we will handle it. Right now, containing the operation takes priority." He left. Ryan turned to Claire. She had already moved to the table and was pulling her personal phone from her jacket pocket, looking at it with the specific expression of someone who is about to use a tool for a purpose it was not designed for and is calculating exactly how far it can stretch. "Talk to me," Ryan said. A parallel communication channel built from personal devices and civilian infrastructure is not elegant, she said, not looking up. It has latency issues and it has no encryption beyond what I can layer on top manually in the next 40 minutes. But it will work for the purpose we need it for, which is passing tactical instructions between team members inside a geographic area that's small enough for the signal strength to hold. How small? Within the base perimeter, we're fine. If your team needs to move outside the perimeter, we start running into problems after about 3 kilometers. The comms relay station is on the south perimeter, Ryan said. Less than a kilometer. Something shifted in Claire's expression. You're thinking about going after the mole yourself. I'm thinking about doing my job, he said. Hayes said to wait. Hayes said to contain the operation. The mole is part of the operation. Claire looked at him directly. For a moment, she was not the analyst and he was not the operator. They were just two people who had grown up in the same house and knew each other's patterns completely. You are going to do something that isn't in the briefing, she said. I'm going to do something that needs to be done, he said. Those are not always the same thing. No, he agreed. But this time they are. She held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she looked back at her phone. Give me 35 minutes to build the channel. Then take Trenton Sellers with you, not Ramirez. Ryan stopped. Why not Ramirez? Because Ramirez has been on this base for 4 years and has access to the communication relay infrastructure through his role in the operations support rotation, she said. That is not an accusation. It is a reason to keep the circle small until we know more. Ryan went very still. He had worked with Dominic Ramirez for 6 years, trusted him with his life, on multiple occasions. And his sister had just put a thread next to Ramirez's name that he could not ignore. You found something, he said. I found a proximity, she said carefully. Access logs from the communication relay show 3 maintenance entries over the past 11 days. 2 are attributed to the facility's technical staff. The third is attributed to a temporary access credential issued to operations support personnel during a scheduling overlap 2 weeks ago, who was on operations support rotation 2 weeks ago. She looked at him. He understood from her expression that she already knew the answer and had known it since she pulled the access logs and had been deciding for the past 60 seconds how to tell him. The credential was a shared rotation credential, she said. 4 people had access to it. I can confirm 2 of them have rock-solid alibis for the time window in question because I can see their badge access to other parts of the facility during that window. That leaves 2, Ryan said. Yes, Ramirez is one of them. Yes, Ryan's jaw tightened. He breathed in slowly through his nose. Who's the other? Corporal Lynn, she said. From the communications room. Ryan looked at the ceiling for a moment. Lynn, who had been the one to catch the transmission from the south perimeter this morning, who had played it for Ryan and Trent with an expression of what had looked like alarm. He found the transmission, Ryan said. He reported the transmission, Claire said. That could mean he's clean. It could, Claire said. Or it could mean he knew we were already close enough that a report would appear more innocent than silence. The 2 possibilities sat in the room like a fork in a dark road with no visible landmark. I can't act on a proximity, Claire, Ryan said. I need more than that. I know, she said. That's why I need 35 minutes. Because if either of them is our mole, they use that credential to access the relay. And if they access the relay, there is a behavioral trace in the system logs that I have not had time to fully analyze yet. Give me the 35 minutes, and I will give you something closer to a name. Ryan looked at his watch. 1:13 p.m., 35 minutes, he said. He walked out. He went to the vehicle bay. The team was there when he arrived, all except Ramirez, who Ryan had asked Trent to redirect to a supply check on the north side of the base with a fabricated inventory discrepancy. It was not elegant, but it gave them the room. He stood in front of Sellers, Trent, and 2 other operators from the team, Petty Officers Garza and Kim, and he gave them the most compressed, honest briefing of his career. No classified terminals, no maps, just his voice in a vehicle bay that smelled like engine oil and was full of the particular quiet of a space that has never been asked to hold a briefing before. He told them about the relay compromise, about the parallel channel Claire was building, about the mole, about the credential and the 2 names. He did not tell them who the names were. He told them that the circle was small for a reason, and that the reason was the job, and that every person in that bay was there because he would trust them with the thing he was about to trust them with. Nobody interrupted. When he finished, Sellers looked at him for a moment and said, "Your sister figured all of this out." "Yes," Ryan said. "In less than 12 hours, less than that, actually." Sellers nodded slowly. Then he said, in the particular tone of a man who has just updated a long-standing assumption. I owe her an apology. Get in line, Trent said quietly. Ryan looked at his team. We move in 35 minutes. Trent and Sellers with me. Garza, Kim, you hold position here and maintain visual on the south perimeter building. Nobody approaches it until we know more. They nodded. He went back to Claire. She was at Trent's personal laptop when he came through the door, typing with both hands, a secondary window open on her phone screen that was showing what appeared to be a layered encryption interface she had built herself or found somewhere that Ryan did not know existed, which was increasingly the category that described everything his sister used. 20 minutes, she said without looking up. Sit down. He sat. He watched her work. At 1:31 p.m., she said, I have the behavioral trace. Ryan leaned forward. She turned Trent's laptop toward him. The screen showed a log analysis. 2 columns of access behavior from the shared credential window. Timestamps. Navigation passed through the relay system. Duration of each access session. This is what normal looks like when a legitimate user accesses the relay for maintenance, she said, pointing to the left column. Short sessions, specific pathways. The user goes where they need to go and leaves. No lateral browsing, no extended session duration. She pointed to the right column. This is the 3rd access session, the one that matters. 64-minute session. Navigation through 14 separate system directories, including 3 that have no maintenance function whatsoever. The user spent 11 minutes in the communication traffic archive. Looking at what we'd been transmitting, Ryan said. Reading our operational traffic, Claire confirmed. Everything we sent through standard channels over the past 9 days. Ryan stared at the session data. 64 minutes. 11 minutes in the traffic archive. A person sitting inside the base's communication system reading 9 days of operational transmissions. Can you tell which of the 2 names it was from the session data, he said. The credential is shared, she said. The session log doesn't differentiate between users on the same credential, but she pulled up a 3rd window. Badge access record. The base entry system logs every door access, every gate swipe, every secure area entry by individual badge. I cross-referenced the timestamp of that 64-minute session against the badge access records for both individuals. She turned the laptop toward him again. The cross-reference was clean. During the 64-minute window of the unauthorized relay access session, one of the 2 names had been logged entering the base gym. 12 separate entries and exits over that period, consistent with a workout. The kind of alibi that a physical system builds for you automatically because you are simply there, moving through space, swiping your badge on equipment. The other names showed no badge activity during that entire window. No movement anywhere on the base, as if they did not exist for 64 minutes. As if they were sitting somewhere very still, using a shared credential on a terminal, reading 9 days of operational traffic. Ryan read the name. He sat with it for a moment. Then he said it out loud. Lynn. Ryan stood up. Something moved across his face. Not surprise, exactly. The surprise had already happened back when Claire first put the name on the table alongside Ramirez's, back when he had understood that the circle of people he trusted had a hole in it. What he felt now was something more like the specific weight of confirmation. The moment when the thing you hoped was not true becomes the thing you have to act on. He sat in that room with us this morning, Ryan said. He played us the transmission. He watched us react to it. He was telling you that you had been identified, Claire said, not warning you. Controlling the information, giving you just enough to believe you were ahead, while he assessed exactly how much you actually knew. Ryan looked at the laptop screen for another second. Then he closed it. I need Hayes, he said. Hayes is managing the false traffic on the compromised channel, Claire said. He cannot break from that without signaling the change. Then I handle it, Ryan. Her voice was not loud. It was very precise. Lynn has authorized access to the communication relay. If he sees a team moving toward that building, he can send a signal in 30 seconds that we cannot stop. We move fast, or he sends the signal. You cannot guarantee both. Ryan looked at her. What are you suggesting, he said. Claire turned back to the laptop. She opened it. She went to the parallel channel she had been building and did something to the interface that Ryan did not follow technically, but understood functionally a moment later when she said, the parallel channel is live. I can push instructions to Garza and Kim's personal devices right now. You want Garza and Kim to take the building, Ryan said. I want Garza and Kim to take the building's external communication terminal offline before Lynn can reach it, she said. The terminal is a physical junction box on the south exterior wall, accessible without entering the building. If that box goes offline, Lynn cannot send from the relay regardless of what he sees coming. Ryan stared at her. How do you know where the terminal is, he said. Because I spent 20 minutes this morning looking at this base's infrastructure map while I was waiting for the raw forensics data to arrive, she said. He stared at her for one more second, then he said, send it. She sent it. Garza and Kim received the instruction on their personal phones at 1:44 p.m. The message was 6 words and a photograph of the South Perimeter building with a red circle on the exterior wall junction box. Ryan and Trent and Sellers were moving at 1:46. They moved in the particular way that trained operators move when speed matters more than appearance. Not running, not drawing attention, but covering ground with an efficiency that looked like purpose without looking like urgency. The way you move when every second is calibrated and not one is wasted. 1:51 p.m. Garza's confirmation came through on Claire's channel. 4 words. Terminal is offline. Claire exhaled. At 1:53 p.m., Ryan and Trenton Sellers entered the South Perimeter Communications Relay building through the main service entrance using Hayes' master authorization code, which Hayes had sent to Ryan's personal phone through the parallel channel 4 minutes earlier in a message that contained nothing else. The building's interior was small. A corridor, 2 server rooms, a monitoring station, and a back office. Lynn was in the back office. He was sitting at a terminal. He heard them coming. He stood up fast, and his hand went toward the keyboard, and Trent covered the distance between the doorway and the terminal in approximately 1.5 seconds, which was fast enough that Lynn's hand landed on the desk 6 inches from the keyboard and did not reach it. Lynn looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at Lynn, 23 years old, sharp-eyed. Signals technician who had pulled that transmission this morning with what Ryan had read as alarm and now understood as the very precise performance of alarm. Corporal Lynn. Lynn said nothing. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the desk. He was doing a calculation that Ryan could see him doing, measuring distances and options and outcomes the way a cornered person does when they are running out of room in every direction. The terminal is offline, Ryan said. The relay is physically severed. Whatever you were planning to send, you can't send it. Lynn looked at him for a long moment. Then the calculation ended, and something in his face went very still. I want to speak to a lawyer, he said. You'll get one, Ryan said, but first you're going to sit down and not move. Sellers had already positioned himself at the door. Trent was standing between Lynn and the keyboard with the specific relaxed readiness of a man who would prefer this to go quietly and is fully prepared for it not to. Lynn sat down. He put his hands in his lap. He looked at the wall. And Ryan Walker stood in a communications relay building on the south perimeter of Fort Liberty, North Carolina, looking at a 23-year-old who had spent 11 days walking through the architecture of an operation and rearranging it piece by piece and thought about all the invisible things in the world, all the things that happen in the gaps between the visible actions, all the work that occurs in the space that nobody watches. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. A message from Claire through the parallel channel. Is it done? He typed back. 30 seconds passed. Then one more word appeared on the screen. Good. He put the phone in his pocket. 2 minutes later at 2:03 p.m., Hayes arrived with base security and took custody of Corporal Lynn. Hayes was still carrying the tablet he had been using to manage the false traffic on the compromised channel, and he handed it to one of the security officers the moment he walked through the door, as if he could not wait to put it down. He looked at Ryan. Clean, Ryan said. Hayes looked around the room. At Sellers by the door, at Trent by the terminal, at Lynn in the chair. Then he said to Ryan quietly enough that only Ryan could hear it, your sister told me what she was going to do while you were moving. Through the parallel channel. Ryan nodded. She sent me the behavioral trace analysis and the badge cross-reference 7 minutes ago, Hayes said. She sent it with a note. Ryan waited. She said, this is the evidence package for Lynn's detainment. The parallel channel will remain live until the operation is fully secured. Let my brother's team do their job. Ryan stood with that for a moment. Let my brother's team do their job. Not my brother. Not the operators, my brother's team. She had been in classified rooms for 11 years. She had moved through the intelligence world with a kind of quiet precision that left no unnecessary marks. She had earned a call sign in Djibouti in 38 minutes on a night when the wrong decision would have ended 4 lives, and she had called it his team. Ryan walked out of the building into the afternoon air. He stood for a moment with the sun on his face, which was something he had learned early in his career to appreciate specifically, The uncomplicated fact of standing outside in ordinary daylight after a thing that could have gone very differently. His phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, expecting another update from Claire. It was not from Claire. It was from Commander Hayes, sent through the now legitimate parallel channel to everyone on the operation, including Claire. It said full debrief in 30 minutes. Everyone present. Dr. Walker, that includes you. Ryan looked at those last four words. Dr. Walker, that includes you. Not the intelligent analyst, not the contractor, not an afterthought. You, a member of the... He put his phone away. He started walking back toward the main building. At 2:19 p.m., Claire was still at Trent's laptop when Ryan came through the door. She was documenting the parallel channel architecture in systematic notes, recording every step she had taken so that it could be reviewed, evaluated, and, if appropriate, incorporated into protocols going forward. She worked the way she always worked, thoroughly, without drama, attending to the thing in front of her with complete focus. Ryan sat down across from her. She did not look up immediately. In custody. He'll talk, she said. They always do when the exit routes are closed. His handlers will be somewhere in the raw relay traffic. It'll take the counterintelligence team a few days, but they'll find them. I know, Ryan said. She finished a line of her documentation and then looked up. She looked at her brother. He looked at her. They were both carrying the particular texture of a day that had asked everything and given something complicated back. Hayes wants everyone in 30 minutes, Ryan said. I know. He sent me the message. You good? She considered the question the way Claire always considered questions, as if they deserved a genuine answer rather than a reflexive one. I'm tired, she said, and I would like a real meal and approximately 10 hours of sleep. But yes, Ryan nodded. Then he said Djibouti, 38 minutes. Do you think about that operation? She looked at him steadily. Sometimes. What do you think about when you think about it? A pause. I think about the 14 minutes I almost didn't have, she said. I almost didn't pull the thread. The data was there. The pattern was there. But I was tired and I had been wrong twice that week. And there is a moment in this work when you have been wrong enough times that being wrong again feels like the safer bet than being right. Ryan was quiet. What made you pull it, he said. She looked at the laptop screen. Someone on that team reminded me of you, she said. Same laugh. Same way of standing in a room like he was holding it up. I looked at him and thought, if I don't pull this thread and I'm right and something happens to him, I will never explain that to myself. Ryan's throat tightened. He did not say anything. So I pulled it, she said. And I was right, and the team got out. She looked back at him. That's what I think about, she said. When I think about Djibouti, he held her gaze. Then he said very quietly, I'm glad you pulled it. She nodded once. Me too, she said. She closed the laptop. She stood up, stretched her neck, and picked up her cold coffee. Took a sip. This is terrible, she said. I'll get you a fresh one, Ryan said. You don't know where the coffee is. I'll find it. He stood up. She watched him for a moment, and something in her face was doing the thing it had been doing since last night, since he first said the word us, since he sent Lynn to custody and texted back done, since he sat down across from her and asked if she was good. That slow, recalibrating thing. That adjustment of a long-held understanding towards something more accurate. She had spent a long time believing that Ryan saw the world in a particular way that did not have room for what she did. She was revising that. Not all at once, not with fanfare. The way real revision happens, quietly, evidence by evidence, moment by moment. He was at the door when she said Ryan. He turned. She was holding the cold coffee cup in both hands, looking at him across the room. Thank you, she said, for last night. For backing me up with Hayes when you had no reason to. Ryan looked at her. I had every reason to, he said. She opened her mouth slightly, then closed it. You didn't know that yet, she said. No, he said. But that's the point, isn't it? You don't have to know something completely to decide to stand behind it. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she looked away. Get the coffee, she said. He went. The corridor outside was busy now, people moving with purpose in both directions, the base fully activated around a situation that most of them only partially understood. Ryan moved through it, nodding to people who caught his eye, carrying the particular internal quiet of a man who has been through something that is not yet finished processing. He found the coffee station. He poured 2 cups. He stood there for a moment with both cups in his hands and thought about his sister sitting in that room with Trent's laptop, documenting everything she had done so carefully that someone else could follow it. That was the thing nobody saw, not just the work itself, but the habit of documenting it for others. The instinct to make sure that what you learned did not disappear when you walked out of the room. The particular generosity of someone who had operated in the shadows long enough to understand that the shadows needed to be mapped for the people who came after. He walked back down the corridor. He came through the door. He set the coffee in front of her. She picked it up without looking away from the new window she had opened on the laptop screen, something that already required her full attention. "What now?" he said, looking over her shoulder. "Now," she said, "I'm looking at the relay traffic archive that Lynn spent 11 minutes reading. Because if he read 9 days of our operational traffic, then whoever sent him needs to know what he found. And that means there is a transmission somewhere in the outbound traffic that I have not located yet, something older than this morning, something that went out before we identified the compromise." Ryan looked at the screen. "You think there's more," he said. "I think Lynn was not the architect of this," she said. "I think he was an access point. The architecture was built by someone older and further away. And the communication between them is in this data somewhere." She looked up at him. "I'm going to find it," she said. He believed her, completely, without reservation. The way you believe something when you have watched it proven so many times that the question of whether to believe it no longer takes up any space in your thinking. He pulled up a chair. "Then I'll stay," he said. She looked at him. "The debrief is in 22 minutes, she said. "We'll be there in 21, he said. The corner of her mouth moved. She turned back to the screen. He sat beside her. And in that room, in the afternoon of a day that had begun with a patch thrown on a table in a room full of laughter, two people who had grown up in the same house and never quite seen each other clearly sat together in front of a screen full of data and looked for the same thing. The truth, hidden somewhere in the noise, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. Claire's hands moved across the keyboard, and at 2:27 p.m. she stopped. She leaned forward. She read something on the screen. And she said, very quietly, in a voice that had all the steadiness of someone who has just found exactly what they were looking for and understands immediately that it is worse than they expected. "Ryan," he looked. He read what she was pointing to. The outbound transmission. Buried in the relay archive under a routing designation that was designed to look like automated system traffic. Timestamped 11 days ago. Containing in encoded format a communication that when decoded and laid plain was not a status update and not a timeline confirmation and not any of the operational communications that Lynn had been reading and forwarding. It was a name that neither of them had expected to find, a name that belonged to someone who was at that moment 22 minutes away from walking into a full debrief with every key person on the operation. Ryan stood up so fast his chair scraped back. He said, "Now," Claire said. He was already running. Ryan ran. Not the controlled, purposeful movement from earlier. This was flat out. Corridor eating, shoulder width apart, the kind of running that operators do when the calculation has already been made. And the answer is there is no time. He hit Hayes' office door with his palm instead of knocking. Hayes was on the phone. He looked up sharply, and whatever he saw on Ryan's face made him say into the receiver, "I'll call you back," and hang up before the other person responded. "Close the door," Hayes said. Ryan closed it. "Claire found a transmission in the relay archive," Ryan said. 11 days ago, encoded as automated system traffic. It contains a not move. "Whose name?" he said. Ryan told him. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a very experienced man absorbing information that violates a foundational assumption he has been operating on for a significant period of time. Not loud silence, not dramatic silence. The silence of a structure shifting at the load-bearing level. Hayes set his phone down on the desk. He folded his hands. He looked at his folded hands for approximately 4 seconds. Then he looked up. "You're certain?" Claire decoded it herself. "She is certain." "Where is she now?" "Still in the room." "Documenting." "Tell her to stop documenting," Hayes said, and his voice had changed. Still controlled. But underneath the control, there was something that had sharpened to a point. "Tell her to lock the laptop, pocket the device, and do not transmit anything through any channel until I give the word." Verbally. In person, Ryan understood immediately. If the name in that transmission was who he had said it was, then the exposure was no longer limited to Lynn and to a communications relay and to an intelligence package that had been rearranged. The exposure went somewhere much closer to the center of things. Somewhere that could see everything Hayes did next before Hayes did it. Ryan pulled out his personal phone and sent Claire 4 words through the parallel channel. "Lock it, sit tight." Her response came back in 11 seconds. Already done. He showed Hayes the screen. Hayes looked at it. Then he stood up. The debrief, Ryan said. 20 minutes. The debrief does not happen, Hayes said. If we cancel the debrief, we do not cancel it, Hayes said. We change the location. We change the attendees. And we change what gets discussed. He came around the desk, moving now with the particular contained velocity of a man who has made the decision and is in the execution phase. Two things happen in the next 15 minutes. First, you go back to your sister and you stay with her and you bring her to the alternate debrief location, which I will send you in 30 seconds through your personal channel. Second, you tell nobody else about what was in that transmission. Nobody. Your team. OC, nobody. Until I have positioned myself correctly, any knowledge of that name is a liability. OC, Ryan said carefully. Hayes met his eyes, especially OC. Ryan stared at him. A cold one, Hayes, he said. Tell me straight. I cannot tell you anything straight until I know what I am looking at, Hayes said. What I can tell you is that the name in that transmission has a professional relationship with Lieutenant Commander OC that predates their current postings. And that relationship is something I know about because I have been watching it for reasons that have nothing to do with this operation. He paused, or did not have anything to do with this operation until 4 minutes ago. Ryan absorbed that. 2 names in a transmission. He had assumed the name in the transmission was the architect, the person Lynn reported to, the intelligence behind the operation. He had not assumed there might be a second layer. How long, Ryan said. Have I been watching OC, Hayes said. Yes. 6 weeks, Hayes said. An anomaly in her access behavior on a separate operation. Small enough that I did not escalate it. Large enough that I did not forget it. He looked at Ryan with the expression of a man who is recalibrating everything in real time. I am starting to believe that what I saw 6 weeks ago was not an anomaly. I am starting to believe it was the edge of something considerably larger. Ryan stood in that office and felt the floor shift again. The same shift as this morning, but deeper, further down. The kind of shift that tells you the thing you are standing on is not ground, it is a surface, and you do not yet know what is underneath it. Alternate location, Ryan said. He walked out. He walked fast. His phone buzzed with the location 30 seconds later, exactly as Hayes had promised. A maintenance storage facility on the eastern side of the base. The kind of location so completely unremarkable that nobody would choose it for anything important, which was precisely why Hayes had chosen it. Ryan came through the door of the room where Claire was waiting at 2:31 p.m. She was sitting with Trent's closed laptop in front of her and her hands flat on the table. She had done exactly what he told her to do. She had locked the device and she was sitting with it. She looked at him when he came in. She read his face. It's worse than a name, she said. It was not a question. Yes, he said. Tell me, he told her. She sat with it for a moment. The particular stillness that he now fully recognized, concentration so complete that it consumed the surface. Then she said, Ose came into the room this morning. During the relay analysis, she stood in the corner and watched the entire time. I know, she saw everything I did. Every step of the relay closure. Every thread I pulled. If she reported what she saw, she may not have had time, Ryan said. The parallel channel isolated our traffic, and the relay went offline when Garza took the terminal down. The window between her seeing the work and losing transmission capability was narrow. Narrow is not zero, Claire said. No, he agreed. It is not. She stood up. She picked up the laptop. She looked at him with those level eyes and said, Where are we going? Eastern Maintenance Facility. Hayes is setting the debrief there. You, me, Hayes, and the team members I trust. Nobody else. OC will expect to be in the debrief. Hayes is handling that. How? He is not going to tell me that, Ryan said. And I am not going to ask him right now. Claire nodded once. She moved toward the door. Ryan fell into step beside her, and they walked through the corridor at a pace that was purposeful without being conspicuous. 2 people moving through a base that was full of people moving. Nothing to mark them as different from any of the other movement except the thing they were carrying on the inside. At 2:39 p.m., they reached the Eastern Maintenance Facility. Hayes was already there. So were Trent, Sellers, Garza, and Kim. Not Ramirez. Still not Ramirez. Ryan clocked that and did not say anything about it. Hayes closed the door. He looked at everyone in the room. What I am about to tell you, he said, stays inside this room until I authorize otherwise. That is not a courtesy request. It is a direct order. Anyone who transmits any portion of what I say here through any channel before I authorize it will face consequences that will end their career. Am I understood? Everyone in the room understood. Hayes nodded. Then he said, we have a second problem. He laid it out without softening it. The transmission from 11 days ago. The name inside it. The professional relationship between that name and Lieutenant Commander Osi. The 6-week anomaly he had been watching in Osi's access behavior. The timeline correlation between the anomaly and the construction of the manipulated intelligence package. He did not accuse Osi directly. He laid the threads on the table and let the room follow them to the same place he had followed them. The room was very quiet when he finished. Marcus Trent was the one who spoke first. She was watching Claire work this morning, he said. The whole relay closure. She was 3 feet away. Yes, Hayes said. And then she walked out to make calls. Yes. What channel did she use for those calls, Trent said. Hayes looked at him. An internal secure line, which runs through the relay, which at that point, Hayes said had its external terminals severed by Garza. So whatever she transmitted, if she transmitted anything, went into the relay and stopped. Garza straightened slightly at the sound of his name. The terminal was down at 144. I confirmed. She left this room at approximately 150, Claire said from across the room. Everyone looked at her. I noted the time because I was tracking who was in the room during which phases of the work, she said. Standard practice. OC entered at approximately 111. She left at 149 or 50. The terminal was already down. So anything she tried to send after 144 went nowhere, Sellers said. If she tried to send it through the relay, yes, Claire said. But OC has been in intelligence work for 17 years. She will have contingency channels. The room absorbed that. Hayes said, she does not know that we have found the transmission. She does not know that we have connected her to the name in it. At this moment, as far as she is aware, we have identified and detained Lynn, we have secured the water facility, and we are preparing for a standard debrief. Where does she think the debrief is? Ryan said. She thinks it is in the main briefing room, Hayes said. I sent her that location through the standard internal message system at 2:15. The compromised relay. The compromised relay, Hayes confirmed, which means whoever is on the other end of that relay knows that the official debrief is in the main briefing room at 3 p.m. Ryan looked at Hayes. Hayes looked back at him. You fed her a location through the compromised channel on purpose, Ryan said. I told you, Hayes said. I became the threat. He said it with the exact cadence that Claire had used when she said it to him that morning. Ryan heard the echo and understood that Hayes had been thinking about what Claire said for the past several hours and had applied it. OC will be in the main briefing room at 3 p.m., Hayes said, waiting for a debrief that is not going to happen. And while she waits, counterintelligence will be walking through the door. The room absorbed this. Then Trent said, very quietly, you had this plan before Ryan came to your office. Hayes looked at him. I had the 6-week anomaly, Hayes said. I did not have the transmission. When Ryan walked into my office 20 minutes ago, he gave me the confirmation I needed to move. He paused. Dr. Walker gave me the confirmation I needed to move. He looked at Claire. She met his eyes. The transmission decode, he said. You are certain of the accuracy. I am certain of the decode, she said. I am certain of what it says. What it means operationally is your determination, not mine. Hayes nodded. Then he did something that Ryan had never seen him do in 9 years. He said, what do you think it means? Not to Ryan. To Claire. Claire was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is not hesitation. The kind that is choosing words with the precision they deserve. I think she said that Lynn was the access point, and the name in the transmission was the coordinator. I think OC's role was something different from both of those. I think she was the validator, the person inside the command structure, whose purpose was to ensure that the intelligence package was accepted without sufficient scrutiny, not to fabricate it, to create the conditions under which the fabrication would not be questioned. The room was completely still. A facilitator, Sellers said. A gatekeeper, Claire said. 4 analytical teams reviewed the intelligence package. All 4 cleared it. The review process runs through the intelligence officer's office, through OC's office. Nobody said it out loud. Nobody needed to. Hayes looked at his watch. 2:51 p.m. 9 minutes until OC walked into the main briefing room. We stay here until I receive confirmation from the counterintelligence team, Hayes said. Nobody moves. Nobody transmits. We wait. They waited. The 9 minutes were among the longest Ryan Walker had experienced in a career full of long minutes. The specific tension of a room full of people who are trained to act sitting completely still was a physical thing, something you could feel in the air between people. Claire sat with the closed laptop on her knees. Ryan stood against the wall. Trent was at the door. At exactly 3 p.m., Hayes' phone vibrated. He looked at it. He read it. His face did not change, exactly. But something in the set of his shoulders completed a resolution that had been building since morning. She walked in at 2:58, he said. Counterintelligence took custody at 300 hours. Nobody cheered. Nobody said anything dramatic. These were professional people, and professional people in moments like this tend toward a specific kind of quiet that is not absence of feeling, but is the management of it. The understanding that what you feel right now belongs to you privately, and the job still has claims on your external presentation. Trent let out one long breath. Garza looked at the ceiling. Kim nodded once to himself. Sellers looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at Claire. She was looking at her hands folded on top of the closed laptop, not celebrating. Sitting with the weight of what the last 18 hours had produced, which was not a clean victory but a complicated one. The kind that leaves you understanding that the world had more layers than you can see from any single position. Dr. Walker, Hayes said. She looked up. I need a full written debrief of every step you took from the moment you entered the briefing room last night to the moment you locked that laptop 40 minutes ago. Every thread you pulled, every data set you accessed, every decision you made and why. I need it in enough detail that any qualified analyst can follow your methodology completely. She nodded. When do you need it, she said. Yesterday, Hayes said. And for the first time all day, there was something at the edge of his voice that might, in different circumstances, have been the beginning of a very tired smile. I'll have it to you by 0800 tomorrow, she said. Hayes nodded. Then he said, there is one more thing. He looked at everyone in the room. What happened here today goes into a classification category that most of you do not currently hold access to. In approximately 4 hours, you will all receive clearance elevation paperwork. You will sign it. After you sign it, what you know becomes protected under statutes that most people in uniform spend entire careers never encountering. He paused. I am telling you this not as a restriction, but as a recognition. What was done in this room today is significant enough that the system protects it at the highest level. Understand what that means. Everyone understood. Hayes picked up his phone and walked out to make calls. The room, without him in it, felt different. Smaller in some ways. More human. Trent looked at Claire. The debrief you're writing, he said. It's going to be a training document, isn't it? Someone's going to use your methodology to build a protocol. Probably, Claire said. Good, she looked at him. You should put your name on it, he said, the whole name. Not just Dr. Walker, your full name. She held his gaze for a moment. I'll think about it, she said. Ryan had been watching this exchange from the wall. He pushed off it now and walked to the center of the room. He looked at his team, at Sellers and Garza and Kim, at the people who had moved when he asked them to move and held position when he asked them to hold, and had done their jobs in a room and a situation and a level of operational ambiguity that their training had not specifically prepared them for. Good work, he said, not a speech. 2 words. The Walker family vocabulary for things that went much deeper. They nodded. They began to move slowly. The decompression that follows the release of sustained pressure. The particular loosening that happens when the thing is done, and the body starts to remember that it has been running on adrenaline and coffee for most of a day. Garza and Kim left together, already talking quietly about food, in the tone of men who have remembered they are hungry. Sellers paused at the door and looked back at Claire. Djibouti, he said. She looked at him. Trent told me the story, Sellers said. 38 minutes. 37 and some change, she said. Sellers looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man adjusting a long-held assessment. Ghost actual, he said. Not mocking it. The way you say a call sign when you understand exactly how it was earned. He walked out. Trent lingered a moment longer. He looked at Claire, then at Ryan, then at the floor, which was the Trent version of an emotional display. For the record, he said to neither of them specifically, I never thought the patch was funny. He walked out before either of them could respond, which left Ryan and Claire alone in the maintenance facility at 3:11 p.m. with the particular texture of a silence that belongs to 2 people who have been through something together that they will carry for a long time. Ryan looked at his sister. She was still sitting with the closed laptop, still composed, but he could see the tiredness now that the situation had released its grip on her. The dark circles were darker. The set of her shoulders had dropped slightly from the pitch they had been holding all day. She looked like someone who had been running a race that most people did not know was being run, and had just crossed a finish line that most people would never see. You should eat something, Ryan said. You keep saying that. It keeps being true. She almost smiled. Then she said, there is something I need to tell you about the operation, about what I think it actually was. Ryan pulled up a chair. She opened the laptop. Not to send anything. Hayes's order stood, but to show him something she had been sitting on for the last 40 minutes. She turned the screen toward him. He looked at it. It was a map. Not the infrastructure map from this morning. A different one. Broader. Regional. With 3 points marked on it in red, connected by lines. The mountain facility. The water treatment plant. And a third location that Ryan had not seen in any briefing. What's the third point, he said. A regional command node, Claire said. Military communications infrastructure. I found the reference in the relay archive while I was looking for the outbound transmission. It appeared in Lynn's reading history. He spent 4 minutes on documents related to this location. He was reading about a military communications node, Ryan said slowly. He was reading about a military communications node that services the same regional area as the water treatment facility, Claire said. And that sits between the mountain facility and the water plant on this map. Ryan looked at the triangle formed by the 3 red points. The mountain was the misdirection, he said. Yes, Claire said. And the water plant was the stated objective, he said. The thing we were supposed to find when we dug deep enough. The thing we were supposed to stop. He looked at her. She looked back at him. You think the water plant was also a misdirection, he said. I think we were supposed to find it, she said. I think the intelligence was designed with enough of an authentic thread that a sufficiently good analyst would unravel it. I think the communication pattern anomaly was real. I think the source loop was real. I think the relay vulnerability was real. All of it was real. Because it was designed to be found, Ryan said. By someone good enough to find it, she said. And when that person found it and stopped it, everyone's attention would be on the water plant, on the relay, on Lynn, while the actual objective was the communications node, she said, which nobody was watching, because everyone was watching the water plant. Ryan sat with that. The mountain was misdirection layer 1, pull the SEAL team out of position. The water plant was misdirection layer 2. Give the analysts something real to find, something worth finding, something that would consume all the attention of the response. And the communications node was the actual target, sitting untouched, unwatched, in a triangle between the other 2 points. If someone takes that node offline, Ryan said, the regional military communication infrastructure loses a primary relay point, Claire said, for an unknown period, depending on how the attack is executed and what kind of backup capacity exists. That's not a civilian casualty event, Ryan said. That's a military capability degradation event. Yes, she said. That's a different kind of objective. Yes, she said. It is. Ryan looked at the map. He thought about the name in the transmission. The coordinator, the person who had designed something elegant enough to have a found layer and a hidden layer and a redundant layer and a human access point and a command structure validator, all working simultaneously, all designed to move in the same direction. That was not improvised. That was architecture. Someone had built this over time, patiently, carefully, with a long view of what they wanted to accomplish and a clear understanding of how the people they were working against would respond. You need to tell Hayes, Ryan said. I know, Claire said, but I want to be sure first. How sure are you right now? She looked at the map. 87%, she said. That's not 100, she said. It is not. The 13% is the part I am still working on. The part where I might be pattern matching onto noise because I have been awake for 30 hours and my brain is filling in connective tissue with inference rather than evidence. Ryan looked at her. What do you need, he said. Access to the node's network monitoring logs for the past 30 days, she said. If someone has been preparing an attack on that communications infrastructure, the preparatory activity will be in those logs. The same probe pattern I found in the water facility's records. Can you get that access? Not without Hayes, she said. Then we tell Hayes. If I am wrong, you have been right about every single thing since you walked into that briefing room, Ryan said. The communication pattern, the source loop, the relay bridge, the staged access tools, Lynn, the outbound transmission. Osei, every single thread you pulled was the right thread. She looked at him. That doesn't mean the next one is, she said. No, he said. But you are at 87% on something that, if you are right, is a military communications attack that nobody is currently responding to. The cost of telling Hayes and being wrong is an embarrassing conversation. He held her gaze. The cost of not telling Hayes and being right is something I do not want to calculate. She looked at the map for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop. She stood up. I need to say something to you first, she said. Ryan waited. She looked at him with those level eyes. And for a moment, the analyst was somewhere slightly behind the surface and the person who had grown up in the same house was more visible. Last night, she said. When you came and found me in the corridor after Hayes released us. You said I was wrong about you. About the call sign, Ryan said. Yeah? You said you were wrong about me, she said. Not about the call sign. He held no, he said. That was the most honest thing you have said to me in 11 years, she said. I want you to know I heard it. Ryan was quiet. He had built 20 years of career on the ability to function clearly and effectively in conditions that would shut most people down. He had given orders under fire and kept his voice level doing it. He had delivered the kind of news that breaks people and kept his face steady so the person receiving it had something steady to hold on to. He was finding it difficult to keep his face steady right now, not because of the mission, not because of the operational weight of what the last 24 hours had held, because of his sister standing in front of him with a closed laptop and 30 hours of no sleep behind her eyes, telling him she had heard him. I should have said it a long time ago, he said. Yes, she said. You should have, I know. But you said it when it mattered, she said. That counts. She moved toward the door. He walked beside her. They went to find Hayes. They found him in the corridor outside the main building on his personal phone, speaking in the clipped, precise tones of someone delivering a situation report to someone who outranked him significantly. He saw them coming and held up one finger. They waited. He finished the call. He looked at them. He looked specifically at Claire's face, which was carrying the particular expression that Hayes had now seen enough times in the past 24 hours to recognize. He said, she told him about the communications node. She told him about Lynn's reading history, about the 30-day probe preparation window she needed to verify, about the triangle, about the architecture of the misdirection, the found layer over the hidden layer. Hayes stood in the corridor and listened to all of it without interrupting once. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said 87%. She had not told him the number. He had arrived at it himself from her face. Yes, she said. Hayes looked at the wall for a moment, the specific look of a man running a rapid calculation on risk tolerance. Then he said the node monitoring logs. How long do you need? 45 minutes if the logs are formatted the way I expect them to be, she said. 90 if they are not. The logs are going to be formatted in a way that will make you want to put your head through a wall, Hayes said. Military infrastructure record keeping is approximately 40 years behind where it should be. Plan for 90. The corner of Claire's mouth moved. I'll need a terminal with access to the regional military infrastructure database, she said. Isolated. Not running through the relay. I have a terminal in my office that has never been connected to the relay, Hayes said. It runs on a completely separate physical line. I have been keeping it that way for 6 weeks. He paused. For reasons that have become considerably clearer today. He had been building his own parallel infrastructure, a different kind of ghost channel, for 6 weeks, while OC was walking through his professional proximity and he was watching the edge of something he could not yet name. Ryan looked at Hayes with a new understanding of the man, of the particular kind of patience that could hold a thread for 6 weeks without pulling it. The same patience that Claire exercised in every room nobody saw her work in. They walked to Hayes' office. Claire sat down at the isolated terminal at 3:44 p.m. Ryan stood against the wall. Hayes sat at his desk and began the paperwork that a situation like this generates, which is significant and begins immediately and does not pause for operational elegance. The clock on the wall moved. Claire worked. At 4:11 p.m., she said, without looking up, they were there. Ryan straightened. The probe activity, she said. Same signature as the water facility. 31 days of preparatory scanning against the communications node's external-facing systems. Low signature. Building toward access. The node was the real target, Ryan said. The node was the real target, she confirmed. Are they in yet? Hayes said, looking up from his desk. No, she said. The probe pattern shows still in reconnaissance phase. They had not moved to access staging yet. The water facility had pre-staged tools. The node does not. She paused. Which means if we move now, we get there before they do. Hayes was already on his phone, not the compromised relay, his personal device. He was dialing a number that Ryan had never seen him dial. The kind of number that does not appear in standard directories. The kind of number that connects you to people who operate above the organizational charts that everyone else uses to understand who reports to whom. He spoke for 40 seconds. He listened for 20. He hung up. He looked at Claire. The node is being secured, he said. Physical and cyber. Full lockdown effective in 18 minutes. He looked at Ryan. Operation Silent Horizon, he said, is officially over. Ryan stood with that. Over. Not the version of over that had been on the table yesterday morning, when a SEAL team was going to extract a commander from a mountain facility in a clean operation with defined objectives and an exit route and a debrief afterward. This version. The version where the operation turned out to be a different operation than the one it appeared to be. And the entire shape of it was found not by the strongest person in the room, but by the quietest one. Hayes set his phone down. He looked at Claire. She was still at the terminal, finishing her documentation, recording the probe data with the same systematic care she brought to everything she did, making sure the record was complete, making sure whoever came after would be able to follow it. Hayes watched her for a moment. Then he said, and his voice carried something that Ryan had not heard in it before, across 9 years of professional relationship, something that was not the authority of a commanding officer, but the simpler and rarer weight of genuine respect, Dr. Walker. Hayes stood, he straightened, and Commander William Hayes, 30 years of military service, 2 wars, a career built on the principle that the strongest person leads and the quietest person supports, rendered a slow, precise, deliberate salute to an intelligence analyst in contractor clothing sitting at an isolated terminal in his office. Ryan did not move. Claire looked at Hayes for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then she said, very quietly, "I'm a civilian, sir. You don't have to do that." "I don't." He held the salute. She looked at him, and something moved across her face. Not the composure, not the professionalism. Something underneath all of it, the layer that had been there the whole time beneath the level eyes and the steady voice and the 11 years of moving through dark rooms without making a sound. She was someone who had spent her career being useful without being seen, and she was being seen. "Thank you, sir," she said. Hayes lowered his hand. He sat back down. He picked up his pen. 90 minutes, he said, not looking up from the paperwork. "Both of you, food and sleep." "That is an order." Ryan looked at Claire. She was already reaching for her cold coffee. He crossed the room, took it out of her hand, set it down, and said, "Come on." She looked at him. "Food," he said. "Real food. I found some mess hall while I was looking for the coffee this morning." She looked at her terminal. "The documentation will be there in 90 minutes, he said. 0800 is still hours away." She looked at the terminal for one more second. Then she stood up. She picked up the closed laptop. She walked to the door. Ryan held it open. She walked through. He walked through behind her. And in the corridor of that building, at 4:22 p.m. on a day that had started with a patch thrown on a table in a room full of laughter, Ryan Walker walked beside his sister toward the mess hall, and the distance between them was exactly the same as it had always been. Side by side, one step apart, the way they had walked to school from the end of the driveway every morning when they were children. Only now he understood which one of them had been leading. He had been leading from the front. She had been leading from everywhere else. And the world, if it was paying the right kind of attention, ran on both. They ate in the mess hall at 4:30 p.m. in the particular silence of 2 people who have been through something together that neither of them is ready to put into words yet. Ryan had a plate of food that he could not have named 30 minutes later. Claire had soup and a piece of bread that she ate methodically, the way she did most things, completely and without rushing. Nobody bothered them. Word moves through a military base the way weather moves, invisibly and everywhere at once, and whatever word had moved through Fort Liberty in the past hour had produced a specific radius of respectful distance around the table where Master Chief Ryan Walker and the woman with the contractor badges were sitting. People moved past. Nobody stopped. Trent appeared at 17 minutes in, got food, sat 3 tables away at an angle where he could see the door, and ate without looking at them. Ryan noticed this and understood it for what it was. Trent was not giving them space. Trent was running perimeter without being asked. 9 years, Ryan thought. The man had not changed once. At 4:51 p.m., Ryan's phone buzzed. He looked at a message from Hayes through the parallel channel. 4 lines. Node fully secured, physical teams on site. Cyber lockdown confirmed. Stand down from operational posture. Full written debrief from all personnel by 0800. Get some sleep. Ryan showed it to Claire. She read it. She set her spoon down. She pressed both hands flat on the table. The gesture that Ryan had now seen 3 times and understood was the thing she did when a weight she had been carrying was set down and her body needed a moment to register the absence of it. She sat like that for almost a minute. Ryan did not say anything. He waited. When she lifted her hands, she picked up the bread and finished it. It's over, he said. This part, she said. What's the next part? Counterintelligence takes Lynn and Osi apart. Over the next several weeks, she said. They work backward through every node of contact, every handler, every communication, every operation that either of them may have touched in their careers. That work takes months. It generates a report that goes to people I will never meet. And somewhere in that process, the architect of all of this, the person above OC, the person who designed the misdirection layers, gets a name attached to them. And then Ryan said, and then other people do other work, she said. Not my work, not yours. Ryan nodded. He understood the architecture of accountability, how it moved through the system, how it eventually arrived at consequences that looked, from the outside, like nothing had happened, because the most important work in the world is designed to be invisible. The debrief you're writing, he said. 0800, she said. Hayes said, get some sleep. Hayes said the debrief is due at 0800. He said both. I'll sleep after, she said. Ryan looked at her. Claire, he said. She looked back at him. You have been awake for over 30 hours, he said. You identified a manipulated intelligence package, traced a source loop, closed a relay bridge, built a parallel communication channel, identified a mole, decoded an outbound transmission that connected a validator to an 11-day infiltration, and found a secondary target that the entire operation was designed to protect. You did all of that in under 24 hours. He paused. Write the debrief tomorrow. She held his gaze. The debrief is evidence, she said. The methodology I used to close that relay bridge and the analysis chain that identified the communications node, that all needs to be documented while it is fresh. If I sleep first, I will lose the texture of some of the intermediate steps. The texture matters. Then record it, he said. She looked at him. Talk it through into a recorder. Voice memo. Everything you did in sequence while it is still fully present. Then sleep. Then write the formal version from the recording in the morning. He paused. That way you don't lose the texture and you also don't finish the written debrief on 30-something hours of no sleep, which means the document will be better than it would have been otherwise. Claire looked at him for a moment. Something moved across her face. When did you start thinking like an analyst, she said. I've always thought like an analyst, he said. I just usually apply it to tactical problems. This is a documentation problem. Most tactical problems are documentation problems at some level, he said. She picked up her water glass, took a sip, set it down. Fine, she said. Fine meaning yes. Fine meaning yes, she said. Trent from 3 tables away made no visible reaction. But Ryan noticed that he very slightly relaxed. They left the mess hall at 5:13 p.m. Ryan walked Claire to the contractor quarters on the east wing, the same building where she had been assigned a bunk when she arrived the previous morning, which felt like it had happened in a different week. At the door of the building, she stopped. She turned around. She looked at her brother. I want to ask you something, she said. And I want an honest answer. Always, he said. When you backed me up with Hayes last night, she said, when you said we don't cancel a mission because an analyst has a theory, and then 3 hours later you walked into Hayes' office and told him I was right, what changed for you? Was it the data or was it something else? Ryan looked at her. He thought about the honest answer. He found it. It was both, he said. The data was real. I looked at what you showed me and I could not argue with it. But if you had shown me the same data and it had come from someone I didn't know, someone I had no history with, I might have taken longer to move on it. I might have needed another round of verification first. Because of the history, she said. Because I know how your mind works, he said. I grew up watching how your mind works. You were always the one who saw what was coming before anyone else did. At the dinner table, in a conversation, in any situation where the information was incomplete and someone had to make a read. He paused. I just never applied that understanding to anything outside the family. Claire was quiet. I compartmentalized you, he said. I kept the version of you that I knew from the version of you that existed in the world. And I treated the version I knew as the real one, the full one. And now, she said, now I understand they are the same person, he said. The woman who saw what was coming at the dinner table is the same woman who found the source loop in the intelligence package. It is the same skill. I just never gave it the name it deserved when I was watching you use it at home. She stood with that. The evening air moved between them. You know, she said, when I was 17 and you were already in training, Mom used to say that you got all the courage in the family. Mom was wrong about a lot of things, Ryan said. She was right about a lot of things too, Claire said, but not that one. Ryan looked at the ground for a moment. No, he said, not that one. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled something out. She held it out to him. He looked at it. The patch. Ghost actual. Worn edges. Re-sewn stitching. The fabric faded to a gray that was almost silver under the evening light. I want you to have it, she said. He looked at her. Claire, not as a gift, she said. As a reminder. The next time you walk into a room and the quietest person in it says something you are not sure you want to hear. She held it steady. You earned the right to carry it. Ryan looked at the patch for a long moment. Then he reached out and took it. He held it in both hands the way you hold something that has more weight than its physical mass accounts for. I'll give it back, he said, when this is done. When the debrief is filed and the investigation is complete and everything lands where it needs to land. You don't have to, she said. I know, he said, I want to. She looked at him. Then she said, 0800. I'll have the formal version ready. Record it first, he said. Recording it first, she said. She went inside. Ryan stood outside the building for a moment with the patch in his hand. Then he put it in his chest pocket close enough to feel. He walked back toward the main building. He had his own debrief to write. The next 72 hours at Fort Liberty moved the way the aftermath of a major operation always moves, which is to say, with a combination of intense institutional activity and profound personal quiet. The machinery of military accountability, counterintelligence procedure, and operational review does not pause after a situation resolves. It accelerates. The resolution is not the end. The resolution is the point at which the documentation begins. Ryan wrote his debrief through the night. It was the most difficult piece of operational writing he had ever produced, not because of the complexity of the events, but because of the difficulty of writing honestly about his own sequence of decisions and the ways in which those decisions had both helped and failed the operation at different points. He wrote about the briefing room. He wrote about the patch. He wrote about the 6 hours between when Claire first raised the communication pattern anomaly and when he walked into Hayes' office with her analysis, and what he had done during those 6 hours and what he had not done, and why. He wrote, I delayed action on credible intelligence because the source was personally familiar to me in a context that I had not updated. I knew my sister. I did not yet know Dr. Walker. By the time I understood they were the same person, she had already done the work herself. He read that sentence back twice. Then he left it in. The honest version was the only version worth filing. Claire's debrief arrived in Hayes' secure inbox at 7:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the deadline. Hayes read it twice before the morning briefing. He sent a single-line response. This is the most comprehensive analytical debrief I have received in 30 years. It will be used. Claire read the message on her phone, set the phone face down, and went back to sleep for 3 more hours. At 11 a.m. on the second day, Ryan found her in the base's small common room with a cup of actual hot coffee and a tablet, reading something that was not work-related for the first time in what was probably longer than she would admit. He sat down across from her. She looked up. Hayes wants you for a meeting at 1400, he said. What kind of meeting? The kind where people who outrank Hayes are in the room, he said. She set down the tablet. I see, she said. You are not in trouble, he said quickly. The opposite of trouble. Define opposite of trouble. The kind of meeting where they discuss what happens next, he said. With you, with your role, with the work you did and what it suggests about how certain capabilities should be structured going forward. Claire picked up her coffee. She took a sip. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. They want to change something, she said. I think they want to ask you what should change, he said, which is different. She set the cup down. She looked at the table for a moment. When I took this assignment, she said, I was told it was a single operation, intelligence support for a specific mission. I know, he said. I have position, a team, work that I am in the middle of. I know, he said. I am not interested in becoming something institutional, she said. I do not work well inside large structures. I work well in the spaces between large structures, where the things that large structures miss tend to accumulate. Ryan looked at her. Tell them that, he said. Exactly that. At 1400. She looked at him. You think they'll listen, she said. I think, he said, that you have spent the last 36 hours demonstrating exactly why they should listen to you. And I think Hayes will be in that room. And I think Hayes has now seen enough to make sure the right people are listening. She considered this. Will you be there, she said. If you want me there, he said. A pause, I want you there, she said. He nodded. 1400, he said. He stood to leave. She said, Ryan, he stopped. The debrief, she said. Your did you write? He looked at her. The truth, he said. All of it, she said. Not a question. All of it, he said. She held his gaze. Something in her expression completed a long journey. Good, she said. He walked out. The 1400 meeting was in a room that Ryan had not been in before, on a floor of the main building that required a clearance level that he had held for years but had rarely needed. The people in the room when he and Claire arrived were 4 in number, not counting Hayes, who was already there, and who looked at them when they came in with an expression that said he had been in this room for a while and had been managing it on their behalf. Ryan did not know all 4 people by name. He knew them by type. The particular type of person who exists in the upper reaches of the military and intelligence structure, where rank markers become less visible and the authority they carry becomes more ambient, felt in the quality of the room's attention when they speak rather than the hardware on their uniforms. One of them, a woman in her 60s with the specific bearing of someone who has made consequential decisions for a very long time and is comfortable with that, looked at Claire when she sat down and said, "Dr. Walker, we have read your debrief, all of it," said the man to her left, which Ryan gathered meant that the debrief had traveled further up the chain than Hayes's inbox. "Yes," Claire said. "We have some questions," the woman said. "Of course," Claire said. "Not about the operation," the woman said. "About you." Claire sat with the particular composure that Ryan now fully understood was not detachment. It was presence so complete that it looked like stillness from the outside. "Ask," Claire said. What followed was 45 minutes of the most substantive professional conversation Ryan had ever sat in a room with. The 4 people asked Claire about her methodology, about how she had learned to read the behavioral pattern and system logs, the way she described in the debrief, about the Djibouti operation, which they had clearly already read about in detail, about the decisions she made under the 2-hour time compression, about her assessment of the architectural sophistication of the operation they had unraveled, and what it suggested about the people behind it. Claire answered every question, directly, completely, without performing modesty and without overstating. She said, "I don't know," 3 times across the 45 minutes, which was, Ryan thought, exactly the right number of times for someone who actually understood the limits of their own knowledge. At the 46th minute, the woman said, "What do you need?" Claire blinked. It was the smallest possible tell. A single blink that registered the shift from being questioned to being asked. "I need to explain what I mean by that question before I answer it," Claire said. "Go ahead," the woman said. "Most people who ask an analyst what they need are asking about resources," Claire said. "Computational access, budget infrastructure. I want to understand if that is what you are asking." "It is part of what I am asking," the woman said. "Then the resource answer is this," Claire said. "I need access to raw data rather than summarized packages. Every time in my career that I have found something important, I have found it in the layer below the summary. The summary is created by someone who has already decided what matters. The raw data has not decided anything yet." She paused. The intelligence package for Operation Silent Horizon cleared 4 analytical teams because every one of those teams was working from the summarized version. Nobody was in the raw logs. The room was quiet. "That is a structural observation," the man to the woman's left said. "Yes," Claire said. "You are describing a gap in the review architecture." "I am describing the gap that the people who built this operation found and used," Claire said. "They did not need to compromise 4 analytical teams. They only needed to compromise the layer between the raw data and the summary. Everything above that layer was working from corrupted input and had no mechanism to detect it. The silence in the room had the particular quality of people sitting with an uncomfortable truth about a system they are responsible for." Hayes looked at the table. Ryan looked at Claire. She looked at the woman. "What else?" the woman said. "Autonomy," Claire said. "Not from oversight. From the assumption that the analytical role is support. What happened in the past 36 hours was not support. It was primary function. The intelligence work was not adjacent to the operation. It was the operation. And the structure that brought me into that briefing room positioned me as an attachment to the tactical team rather than as a principal." She paused. "If I had been positioned correctly from the beginning, the communication pattern anomaly would have been escalated in a different way. The 6-hour gap between my first observation and the decision to act on it would not have existed. Every person in the room understood what she was not saying directly. The 6-hour gap had existed partly because Ryan had not acted on her observation immediately. The 6-hour gap had existed because she had been positioned as support, and he had treated her as support, and support gets heard differently than principal. Ryan sat with that. He had written it in his debrief. Now he was sitting in a room watching the institutional version of that truthland on the people who built the structure that produced it. The woman looked at Hayes. Hayes said, "The structural observation is accurate. I will confirm that from my own experience of the past 36 hours. The woman looked at Ryan. Ryan said. The woman looked back at Claire. "We will not make you an institution," she said. "That is not what this conversation is about." Something in Claire's posture released, almost imperceptibly. "What it is about," the woman continued, "is making sure that the next time you walk into a room, you walk in with the positioning that matches the function, not the function that matches the positioning." Claire held the woman's gaze. "That would help," she said. "It will happen," the woman said. She said it the way people say things when they are not describing an intention but a decision that has already been made and is being communicated. The meeting ended at 14:53 p.m. In the corridor outside, Hayes walked beside Ryan and Claire for a moment and then stopped, turned, and looked at Claire directly. "One more thing," he said. She waited. He reached into the breast pocket of his uniform and produced a folded document. He held it out to her. She took it, unfolded it. Ryan leaned slightly to read it over her shoulder. It was an official commendation. The language was the formal, compressed language of military commendation documents, which said a great deal in very few words and meant all of them. In the section that named the actions being recognized, 4 lines had been written in the specific terms that Hayes had clearly chosen very carefully. Exceptional analytical performance under operational pressure, identification and neutralization of multi-layer intelligence compromise, prevention of civilian infrastructure attack affecting a regional population of 400,000, identification of secondary military target preventing significant capability degradation. And at the bottom in the line reserved for the name under which the commendation was filed, not Dr. C. Walker, not Intelligence Specialist Walker. Ghost Actual. Claire read it. She read it again. She folded it carefully along the original fold lines. She put it in her jacket pocket. She looked at Hayes. "Thank you, sir," she said. "It does not begin to cover it," Hayes said. "But it is a start." He walked away down the corridor. Ryan stood beside his sister, had her hand over her jacket pocket, over the folded document, the same way you put your hand over something you want to make sure stays where you put it. "Hey," Ryan said. She looked at him. He reached into his own chest pocket. He pulled out the patch. He held it out to her. "I told you I'd give it back," he said. She looked at the patch. Then she looked at him. "I said you didn't have to," she said. "I know, you should have it. It belongs with you. It has always belonged with you." She looked at it for another moment. Then she took it. She turned it over in her hands. The worn fabric, the re-sewn edges, the silver gray of the letters. "Ghost Actual. You know," she said, "when they gave me this, it's the team in Djibouti. They didn't make a ceremony of it. One of them just left it on my equipment bag one morning. No note, no explanation. I didn't even know who put it there." "How did you know it was from them?" Ryan said. "Because that same morning, every single one of them stopped and looked at my bag on the way out the door," she said. "Nobody said anything, but they all looked. Ryan was quiet. That's how they said thank you," she said. "In a room full of people who don't say thank you out loud." She closed her hand around the patch. "I understood it," she said. "I understood it exactly." Ryan looked at his sister standing in a corridor with a commendation in her pocket and a call sign in her hand, 34 years old, 38 hours of almost no sleep. The same person who had stood at the end of the driveway every morning when they were children, and he thought about all the years he had spent believing that the strength that mattered was the kind you could see, the kind that walked into rooms first, the kind that wore its evidence on the outside. He thought about what it had cost her to work in a world that was built around that belief. Not just in the past 36 hours, for 11 years. "Claire," she looked at him. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. Not just the patch, not just the briefing room. For the 11 years before it where I knew you were doing something important and I never once asked what it was." She held his gaze. "You couldn't ask," she said. "Most of it was classified." "I'm not talking about the details," he said. "I'm talking about the asking, the willingness to try to understand. I never tried." She was quiet. He had said the easy version last night. "I was wrong about you." Clean. Simple. The kind of thing you can say and feel like the account is squared. This was the harder version. This was the part where you name exactly what you did and exactly what it cost the other person. And you do not let the naming be comfortable. Claire looked at the wall for a moment. Then she looked back at him. "You're trying now," she said. "Trying," he said, "not succeeding." "Trying is how succeeding starts," she said. "That's actually how it works. You don't get to start from success. He looked at her. When did you get wise? He said. Approximately 11 years ago, she said. When I stopped waiting for the rooms I was in to validate me and started being more interested in the work than the validation. Ryan laughed. It surprised him. The laugh came from somewhere genuine, the kind that happens when something lands exactly right. She smiled, a real one. The first full, unguarded smile he had seen from her in longer than he could remember. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then she said, I need to sleep. Yes, he said, you do. Tomorrow I want breakfast. Real breakfast. Not mess hall food. There's a diner 12 minutes off base, he said. Trent showed me. He says the eggs are legitimately good. Trent knows where the good eggs are, she said. Trent always knows where the good eggs are, Ryan said. It's one of his more underrated qualities. She tucked the patch into her jacket pocket alongside the commendation. She adjusted the strap of her equipment bag on her shoulder. She looked at him. 0730, she said. Do not be late. I have never been late to anything in my adult life, he said. You were 6 minutes late to my college graduation, she said. He opened his mouth. Traffic, he said. There was no traffic, she said. It was 10 a.m. on a Saturday in a town with 11,000 people. There was significant traffic, he said. There was a Waffle House drive-through, she said. He closed his mouth. She looked at him for a moment with those steady eyes. Then she said 0730. Don't be late. She walked down the corridor toward the east wing. He watched her go. The patch in her pocket. The commendation in her pocket. The 11 years of work that had produced both. Invisible to most of the world. Fundamental to most of what the world did not know it was being protected from. He stood in the corridor for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. He called his mother. She answered on the third ring, the way she always did, slightly wary because calls from Ryan during operational periods were either nothing or everything, and she had learned not to assume. Ryan, she said. Hey, Mom. He said, are you all right? I'm fine, he said. Everything is fine. He paused. I was calling because I spent the last 2 days working with Claire. A pause on the other end. How is she? His mother said. Ryan looked down the corridor where his sister had just disappeared around the corner. She's incredible, he said. A longer pause. I know, his mother said quietly. I've always known. Ryan pressed his lips together. Yeah, he said, I'm catching up. He heard his mother exhale. The kind of exhale that carries a decade of hoping inside it. She saved a lot of people, Mom, he said. She did it in a way that most of those people will never know about. She did it alone, mostly. In the middle of the night, and then she documented every step so that the next person who comes after her can do it better. Silence on the line. That's Claire, his mother said. That's always been Claire. I know, Ryan said, I know that now. He talked to his mother for 11 more minutes. By the time he hung up, the corridor was empty, and the base had moved into evening, and somewhere on the east wing, his sister was sleeping the sleep of someone who had given everything she had and knew exactly what it was worth. The debrief was filed. The node was secured. Lynn was in custody, talking the way Claire had said he would. OC was in custody, not yet talking, but the counterintelligence team had time and evidence and patience, and those three things together had never yet failed to produce a result. The operation was over. The world did not know. The world rarely knows about the operations that succeed. Success is invisible. The catastrophe that did not happen leaves no mark. 400,000 people would drink clean water the next morning without knowing that the water was clean, partly because a woman in contractor clothing had spent 37 hours in a series of rooms that most of them would never be cleared, to enter following threads that most of them would never know existed. That was the work. That had always been the work. Ghost Actual. Not a name for someone who disappeared because they were weak. A name for someone who moved through the shadows, because the shadows were where the real work happened, where the things that threatened the world tried to hide, where only the people patient enough and sharp enough and brave enough to follow the data wherever it led could find them and stop them before they became catastrophe. Ryan Walker went back to his bunk that night and lay on his back in the dark and held the understanding that the last 2 days had given him the way you hold something you know you are going to carry for the rest of your life. He thought about the patch on the table. He thought about the laughter in the room. He thought about the 6-hour gap. He thought about the moment in Hayes' office when a military commander had rendered a salute to a civilian analyst in contractor clothing, and the way Claire had said, "Thank you, sir," in the voice of someone who understood that the gesture was not the recognition was the work itself, and the gesture was just the world finally catching up. He thought about her at the end of the driveway every morning. He thought about what she had said. I know. I've always known. She had known then. She had known who she was and what she was capable of long before any room she walked into was willing to see it. She had simply kept walking into rooms until one of them finally did. At 07:28 the next morning, Ryan Walker was already in the parking lot outside the diner 12 minutes off base, 2 minutes early, standing beside a truck that Trent had loaned him for the morning. At 07:30 exactly, Claire walked through the diner's front door. She looked at him through the window. She was wearing civilian clothes. Her hair was down. She looked like someone who had slept deeply and woken up on the other side of something. She looked like herself, her full self, the version that had been there the whole time. She held up 2 fingers to the server and pointed at a booth by the window, the universal language of two people who know exactly what they want, and sat down without waiting. Ryan walked in. He sat across from her. The server brought coffee. Claire wrapped both hands around the cup. She looked at her brother. He looked at his sister. Outside, the morning was doing what mornings do, moving through the ordinary world with complete indifference to what had happened inside a classified base nearby. In corridors and terminal rooms and maintenance facilities, and a mess hall and a 12-minute drive from here. The world did not know. The world was safe. And Ghost Actual was having breakfast. Some people lead from the front, visible and loud, their strength announced by the ground they take and the rooms they command. And the world needs those people. The world is built in part by those people. But there is another kind of strength, the kind that does not announce itself. The kind that moves through the spaces between the visible things, that sees what others miss because it is not busy being seen, that speaks when it is time to speak and not before. That works through the night in rooms that history will never fully record. The kind that carries a worn patch in a jacket pocket and a commendation beside it and a call sign that fits because it is true. Ryan Walker had spent 20 years believing he knew what strength looked like. He had been right about part of it. It had taken his sister to show him the rest. And the rest, it turned out, was the part that saved everyone.